Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to King Pilled. It looks like our only viewer based on the comments is Cooper. Welcome, viewer Cooper. How do you feel
Hello.
about being witness to a stream of the King Pilled?
Um, I mean, I could be doing something better, but
Yeah.
here we are. I did want to take a minute, or by a minute, I actually mean like the next 30 minutes, just to kind of catch up, see how you're doing. Since we had that one guy in the comments who was pissed off at our last stream for just like bullshitting for 20 minutes, we're thinking maybe we'll do it for like an hour, or maybe we'll just do it for the whole stream.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's almost like when we do a stream, we're going to talk about whatever we want, and you guys get to come along for the ride. And to the extent that the things we talk about correspond with the things you expect us to talk about, then lucky you. And to the extent that it's something totally different, well, that's within our purview. So, I
I mean,
happen
you're
to
always
think,
welcome. You're welcome to jump into the chat and like that if you have like good comments, you can actually kind of guide the conversation.
uh huh,
I get distracted really easy. So you just put something shiny there and I'll highlight it.
yeah. Ryan Isaac says, "Wait, you're not my bitch." No, on the other, it's actually the other way around. You collectively are our bitch. You are going to ride along with us and cover whatever subject, think about whatever thing you want, because that's what we get to do. I've got getting my preparations here. I've got my Dr. Pepper, I've got my milk with salt and maple syrup. I've got a little sparkling water, and to top it all off, a Zen.
I got some Diet Pepsi. I did just have a Mexican Coke and some vanilla bean Haagen-Dazs. Um, and then I've got some Zin here. I'm finishing up some popcorn. I'm ready to party, man. However, for a second, I did want to talk about before we get into the serious stuff. Um, Cocaine, overrated. What do you think?
I wouldn't be able to really weigh in just because I haven't actually participated in the booger sugar world, but just based on descriptions of it, it's not something that I would ever really want to do. I mean, like I did Adderall a couple times, and
If you've
I
done
mean,
Adderall, that's basically it.
okay, yeah. So I mean, like, yeah, Adderall's kind of nice, but it's also like I'm like wound up as it is. I don't really need anything to wind me up even more. It
Not
is nice
not
that
an
it
upper
like
kind of guy.
no, I want something that's gonna chill me out. You know, put me back into my seat. Can sit there and think. Like that's more my speed. I don't need something that's gonna get me strung out.
No, okay, so I'm like the total opposite of you.
Okay,
Like,
yeah, that makes
by na-
sense. Yeah,
I'm by nature very like morose and contemplative, just all the time, and I really love the uppers. Um,
yeah.
but okay, so let's see, I've done coke a couple of times, and it basically feels like I don't know, slam like two Red Bulls, smoke a cigarette, something like that.
So then
That,
how
that's
so then
about it.
how is it that it's so like people from the King Pill Discord are saying that what did he say? I just missed the message. I saw that it was something about cocaine, so I know that they're talking about what we're talking about. He said, "It's amazing, but don't do it. It's bad." Okay, so he's giving the exact opposite. I mean, the same conclusion, but he's coming to the same conclusion for different reasons. Why are you?
I like okay, I don't know. It seems it's so mediocre. Like the idea that people ruin their life over
That's what I
coke.
was gonna say. Like if it's this because like that's what you're saying, right? You're not saying, "Oh
Yeah.
man, this made me feel like shit." You're like,
Like it was pleasant.
hmm,
I was awake and kind of focused for I don't know, like 30 minutes, and then it went away. Maybe it's just because like you have to take bumps so often, just to keep riding it. Maybe you just get addicted really fast, and I don't know. Maybe the withdrawals are horrible or something. Maybe that's how people ruin their life. But if we're just talking about like the buzz itself, it's like I don't know. Put a couple zins in your mouth and slam a Red Bull, and you're like 80% of the way there.
so I guess maybe it's kind of like if I think about it, the way that people end up will probably wind up being introduced to it for the first time. It's usually, and I've spent plenty of time in this sort of environment where it's like, all right, we're going to go out, we're going to dance, we're going to get drunk, we're going to play darts or whatever, you know, we're going to go out to a bar, to
I
a
have
club.
heard it's a little more impactful when you're also drinking. I have not mixed the two, and I have no intention of doing that. So
So then I could see like, I mean, this is an age old story where you're like, all right, I'm going to go out and drink a little, get a nice little buzz, and then you get the buzz, but then the buzz starts to go away, and you're like, well, I'm not done having fun yet. I need a little more of a buzz. So I suppose for someone who maybe this is like they've never done it before, and the first time they experience it, they get drawn into, they end up doing 10 bumps throughout the night, spaced out. And maybe by that point, then it becomes harder and harder
they
when
just
you
spend
fall
a whole
off.
weekend doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and then they wake up hungover, and they're like, "Oh man, my head. Oh, I just want to go back to feeling like I did before." And so I could see where that. I guess maybe that's where it would like I don't know, screw people into getting addicted to something that apparently is rather meh.
Yeah, it is rather meh, but maybe I don't know. Maybe you're just doing like I don't know. I'm like okay, I've done like a line and a bump. Like I haven't sat there and just like gone down the fucking table like line. So maybe maybe at that point your brain starts melting. I haven't hit that point. Um, it tastes really bad, so I'm like, eh. Hello, Mr. Westford. Good to see you. Welcome.
Yes, greetings. We would have said that we were going live, except we're very poor at planning.
Yeah.
So
We
Cooper
knew
and
we
I
were
have been
going live eventually.
yeah. We planned it like, I don't know, 5 hours ago. We were like, hey, how about, I was like, what about 5 tonight? And you're like, yeah, okay, that sounds, after we bitched about time zones for a minute, then you're like, yeah, that sounds good. And then we proceeded to just sit here on a voice call, like going through and watching news videos and laughing at them and making fun of libertarians. And so it's kind of funny. All we did now is we're just going to keep doing the same thing that we were doing, except we have a camera on.
Hey, Mr. Westford, you want to come on the show sometime? You seem like a funny guy.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't know anything
we'd love
about
to have
you.
you on. Yeah, except that you keep sending viewers over to us, and I went, I followed him on Instagram, and I subscribed to his YouTube channel because he commented on our last episode, and I saw he's Orthodox, so I thought I knew all the Orthodox people in the world, but apparently I still have a couple more to meet. Bill Hicks wants to know what degenerate behavior we're talking about, and I see that you in behavior. You want to talk to us about degeneracy?
Are you a European?
Get your vowels under control, Bill. He's probably either he's irritable bowel syndrome. He's probably Canadian. That's what I'm guessing. We're surrounded by these fuckers. Like, who let all the Canadians out? There's like I don't know, at least 5 of them in the King Pill Discord, which is I thought I lived in Canada for a few years, and I thought that was all I was going to do. And then he's an Aussie. So he's like a Down syndrome Canadian.
Yeah, like these are the only people worse than Ohioans in my book. Kyle,
Aussies.
by virtue of being, at least he's an American, even though he lives in the worst state in the union. But Australia, really?
Australia. That's not a knife.
My dingo ate my baby.
Or I only have one Zen pack here. I had to pick up all the things. They all fell out last time we were doing that. What the fuck is an Aussie? It's Aussie.
It's kind of like a bussy.
Australia, the bussy of the world.
You live in the bussy.
We have to start calling Jason Bussy Boy now. Oh man! Shout out 2-Bit Podcast. Go check out the stream that he did some day recently. I don't know what day it is, but he did a good stream with Kyle, based Fat Chad, the other Kyle from Ohio. Apparently, there's only Kyles in Ohio. I guess there's Steve. Steve is from Ohio. So
Steve's cool.
what if Steve's middle name was Kyle? You got to find out. Steve, if you're watching, you got to let us know what your middle name is because we've already got two Kyles from Ohio. We can't handle another one. But and then he also had Oliver from the esteemed Semiagog channel, and they had a very interesting conversation. Another really interesting conversation I was just listening to was Tucker Carlson talking to Patrick Bet-David. And it's interesting. People were complaining at one point about Tucker Carlson and his new show being kind of and like he doesn't really have any interesting guests anymore. And let me pull up his channel here on YouTube and just the list. Shut up. The last several episodes that he's done. Look at this list of guests that he's had. So he's got Tim Dillon talking about Disney, boomers, and the creepy corporations that do something, that pretend to love you. Jeffrey Sachs, the untold history of the Cold War, CIA coups around the world, and COVID's origin. Then he's got Patrick Bet-David on Trump, Iran, and what Chris Cuomo should do with the rest of his life. And which this is the one I'm partway through. It's very, very interesting. Patrick Bet-David finally extracts an admission from Tucker that he would consider a presidential run in 2028. Yeah, in typical Tucker fashion, he's very self-deferential. He's like, I wouldn't be any good at it, But the way Patrick Bet-David frames it is, nations come to a point where eventually the people who believe in them, the people who want them to continue and believe in their spirit, are required to do things they may not want to do, and they may not see themselves as cut out for it. But their nation demands this responsibility of them, and it's up to them to fulfill that responsibility. So it was interesting little part of the conversation. But if you listen to these guys talk to each other, there's a whole segment of them in this alternative media overlapping with the business and tech world that they're having. I mean, they still are kind of coming from normie land a little bit, so you have to read between the lines with them a little bit to really pick out where they're coming from or what they're saying. But these guys are talking about the realities of politics at a high level. For a lot of these guys, the world coming from the world that they've lived in and being so intimately familiar with it, they're speed running the whole like libertarian to NRX pipeline pretty quickly. And this is very much a pipeline that exists. And for a long time, it's been fashionable to be, if you're like a disaffected Republican or a disaffected Democrat as someone who's of status or whatever, then you might kind of play footsie with the libertarians a little bit, or you just stay out of politics altogether. But now you've got all these guys who they're going down the same pipeline that many of us have gone down. Because you got a lot of people who are disaffected Republicans or Democrats, and they would probably identify themselves as libertarians, but they won't, because this has been the way it's been for a long time, because
libertarians are gay.
Yeah, nobody wants to be identified with libertarians because everyone has met libertarians. And once you meet a libertarian, you likely don't want to be identified with them. But now they're going down the same pipeline the rest of us went, but because of their own life experiences and their own proximity to the system, they are just speed running this fast. And we're getting directly into conversations about the nation being an expression of its people, and questions of dual loyalty and what it means to have a nation and to live for the sake of the nation and sacrifice for it and all these sorts of things. That the fact that these conversations are happening this quickly, like the current trajectory just simply cannot hold for very long. I don't know precisely which direction it's going to go, but there is happening right now a significant realignment in American politics, and it's being spearheaded by these types of guys. The episodes he had before this, Eric Prince, NATO. We're going to talk about Eric Prince here in a minute. Eric Prince, NATO versus Russia, the secrets of drone warfare and CIA corruption. Prior to that, Dave Smith, Russia, Israel, Trump, and the swamp, Obama, and the media attacks on Joe Rogan. So our boy Dave Smith making it on Tucker. The only one of these episodes that I've listened to is Patrick Bet David, but I just realized I went over and looked at Tucker's channel and I was like, whoa, there's a whole bunch of these that look really interesting. Then he talked to Aaron Rodgers, Epstein's death, psychedelics, fake vax cards in the NFL, and Pat Tillman. Then he's got Trudeau's brother. And then there's some other ones. So I think Tucker, what?
Is Tucker Carlson our guy?
With like, it would be if Tucker Carlson's not our guy, we don't have any guys.
Because according to Natashki, he's a CIA agent. What do you think?
Him being a CIA agent wouldn't preclude him being our guy. So it's kind of really neither here nor there to me. In fact, I would almost prefer that he be a CIA agent because, I mean, if this is what it looks like, if the types of things he's saying are what it looks like to have our guys subverted, then I think our guys need to be subverted. The habits, the way he chooses to live his life, like his detachment from technology, his insistence on getting out into nature, going fishing, building a house, thinking in terms like generationally, where he's building a house, but this house is going to be nicely fabricated. It's going to be a work of art. It's going to be an expression of beauty. And the way he talks about family and his responsibility as a husband, his relationship to his wife, all of these kinds of things, it's like if this is the propaganda that they want to indoctrinate us with, then more power to them. Please give us more of this propaganda. Please give us more propagandists who come out and say all of the most important things about the spiritual state of the nation and the spiritual state of men, who are able to synthesize all of these disparate industries and levels of corruption and package them into a really coherent picture that clearly directs us precisely where we need to be. If that's what the propagandists are going to do, then please give us more propaganda. CIA, I know you're listening. Please send us more. Send us more shills like Tucker Carlson. We need them.
Okay.
Okay, so a couple little interesting things here. So first of all, we talked about the Libertarians just a few minutes ago. We talked about them in the last episode. And just to, I guess, put the nail in the coffin, so to speak, here is the fearless leader himself, Dave Smith. This is what he says now after everything that's happened over the last week or
Matt,
so. What?
Who's your patron saint?
St. Gregory Palamas.
Oh, okay. Yeah, never mind.
Why?
Never mind.
Okay. All right, so let's hear what Dave has to say.
I still love all of the people who fought this battle with me. I think there was something really noble and beautiful about the attempt to take the Libertarian Party and turn it into this force for libertarianism and recreate the Ron Paul revolution. I don't see a path to doing that anymore through this party. I'll continue to support Michael Heiss and Angela McArdle in any way I can, but I'm going to just focus on doing what I do, that I kind of... I have these things that I have a talent for, and that, which is very hard to exactly describe, but that are just my calling in life. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and I know I'm supposed to be doing this. I know I'm supposed to be debating Chris Cuomo in a couple of days. I just know I'm supposed to do that. I know I'm supposed to be doing stand-up comedy, and like, I'm very good at both of those things. And that's how I can contribute to this thing. And I'm never going to stop talking about all the issues I care about. And but I don't know. I mean, I'm almost at a point like maybe I should. Maybe if Chase is going to represent libertarianism the same way I kind of felt like when we won with some of these other guys, I was like, oh, maybe you should use a different word. Maybe I should use a different word. I'll still believe all the same shit, but maybe, I don't know. I outsource it to the fans. You tell me, what's the word that I should call myself? But I will just say that this is I got to take a step back and kind of assess what I'm doing here.
It's almost like there was a group of people 4 years ago telling you this would happen.
Yeah, yeah, right. And I mean, hey, like, we all come around to it at some point. he's coming around to it, and I got to give him props. He's coming around to it, and it's vastly harder for him to make this move than it was for any of us.
Yeah, right.
So there's kind of a trade-off here. Like for him to get to this point and then publicly make this move, knowing exactly what the consequences of it are going to be, the character that takes is I think probably different in some way than the character that it took to make that move, a few years ago. For those of us who made it a few years ago, I'd say apart from Pete, I think prior to Dave, the person who has publicly made a move like this from our circles that got had to deal with consequences of it was Pete. Pete took it pretty hard.
He took a lot of shit.
But like hat tip to Dave. I think good for him. It's also, I mean, the Libertarian Party is as any sort of vehicle for any substantial change is dead. It's gone.
They're just trying to spread the message, dude.
Right. It's Dave is likely the most, next to Ron Paul, and I would say even by this point, in terms of sheer numbers that they're of audience size, like Dave is probably the most influential libertarian of all time. And if he isn't now, he's going to be eventually. But he's also no longer, I mean, he's not going so far as to, he could just say, yeah, I gotta take a step back and look out for the family. He's looking rough. Like he needs to take a step back. He needs to get some of this pressure off of him. His face is showing it. But even he's going so far as to say, you know what? I don't think I'm really going to identify with that label anymore. That label has very clearly been completely subverted. And I know from people who've talked to him privately that he's saying more off screen than he is on. But yeah, so shout out to Dave. I wish him well. I think he's a good man. I think he's done a good job with what he's been working with, and he just, like all of us do, he has finally run into reality. And this is part of the process. We talked about the pipeline, and if he's going to be continuing to be outspoken on his podcast and his stand-up routines and everything like that, I'm sure he's still going to be doing interviews for major media establishments and stuff. So the radicalization will continue. And I expect it's going to accelerate, because once you take that libertarian label off, once you like set that baggage down, you realize how much of an influence it had on you, how much of like you were possessed by this label that you identify with, and once you put that down, you get a lot lighter, and you can go in a lot of different directions.
I was always icky about the term libertarian.
I did call myself an anarchist for a while, and that's so cringy in hindsight.
Yeah, right.
What was your trajectory? How did you start? Where'd you start? How did you end up where you're at? Trace the needle.
So growing up, I was basically normie conservative, essentially. There's no way these wars are for oil. It's because they attacked us and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah,
and then in college, once I encountered student loans, I suddenly became very interested in economics. And I really liked the things this Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren people were saying. And so I went down the rabbit hole to try to demonstrate why free college is actually a good thing. Like why having the federal government pay for college would be a positive thing. And yeah, so I came to libertarianism basically as kind of like a Bernie bro, and went down, listened to like everything Tom Woods, read all the Murray Rothbard books, and then was ANCAP. And so rabid ANCAP for probably, I mean, I went through the stage where I was like, I'm more of like a minarchist, like I think maybe like a night watchman state sort of thing, and I had that
yeah
fedora wearing stage, and then ANCAP, but then I liked Trump. Like I just the memes were too good. I couldn't not get on the Trump train. And so I came up with justifications for why I could continue to be consider myself an ANCAP, but also like Trump and want to vote for him and all that. And then, 2020 was where everything really changed. Then I actually kind of veered away from politics altogether for a little while, and went through my catechumenate, was baptized into the Orthodox Church, and sort of, it was kind of like my mind just didn't grab onto these things for a while, and I needed to go through this process, and then naturally came back around to it again, but seeing everything through different eyes. And it was in that interim and just before it that I was going through the Machiavellians and reading Curtis Yarvin and Nick Land and all that sort of stuff. And so now I've come back around to the idea where, like, on principle, I'm not opposed to the federal government paying for college, but not this federal government and not these colleges.
Natasha was asking how we met.
We met. You want to tell him?
I remember hearing it was right at the. This is the deep lore. I don't know if you're familiar with the kind of the, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, the libertarian stuff that was going on. But there was this movement, you could call it, I guess. It was like 10 people, called the post libertarian moment, where you had a number of people like Pete and Matt and Steve Messina, your co-host at the time. Who else?
Buck
LB
Johnson,
Muniz, Buck
LB
Johnson,
Muniz, Mark Claire,
Andrew, Popular Liberty. A number of people who were starting to move away from libertarianism. And I remember hearing Matt on Pete's podcast, which I didn't listen to Pete regularly. I just happened to be up north one day and I was going for a walk. And I saw he had this episode with this Matt guy. And I put it on during my walk, and Matt was saying all of the things I was thinking. And then I was like, oh, what's this guy saying all the things that I was thinking? So then I jumped over to the King Pilled channel and started spamming in the chat. And then he made a Discord a couple months later, and I was the first one to sign up. And what I did is I just kept really annoying the shit out of him, and now we're friends.
Yeah, it was funny because when I was setting up the Discord, we had a running joke back then, and the old heads of the in the chat here will remember it. We had a running joke back then that we had a supporting listeners group, and there's all this great stuff that's happening in there. And if you want to join it, you just have to join it. Like just go sign up, and you could join it. We're not going to keep you out of it. And we talked about it at length. And we didn't have anything. There was no supporting listeners group, and people were like, "What the fuck? Like, where is the supporting listeners group?" So finally, we created the Discord, and I wanted it to be paywalled because I wanted to keep the riffraff out as much as possible. Didn't work because the very first guy who signed up was definitely riffraff, but so I was like, all right, so let's do some price points here. It'd be nice if maybe the average person paid like $20 for it. So let's make $20 the ideal price point. We're going to do one under it and then one way over it, and try to move people in the $20 range. So the price points were $10 a month, $20 a month, and $50 a month. And I put the $50 there basically just as kind of like a framing thing, just to give you context to make the $20 look better. And the very first motherfucker who signs up at the $50 tier, and I was like, "What the hell's going on?" And it's funny because as it wound up being, when we were at that price point, like half of the people were $50 and half of them were or it would probably be like 40% were at $50, 45% was at $10, and then the remaining, whatever it is, 5% or 10% or whatever was $20. So very few people actually signed up on the $20.
So there's a lesson. There's a lesson there in sales.
Yep.
For all you guys, and that being, if you are providing something of value, give people an option to give you a bunch of money because they will, just because they like what you're doing.
Yes. Speaking of, you can send us super chats and we'll read them. You can also join the King Pill Discord. It is no longer $10 to get in at the baseline, but you can join kingpill.com. That'll get you added in there. We were having a great back and forth last night.
We had to up the immigration controls.
Yeah, right. Right before I was going to go on AA and Orange shows in 1 week, I was like, oh boy, we need to make sure that when this rush of new people comes in, that that we keep that barrier a little bit higher, and it worked. What was I gonna say? Oh, last night in the King Pill Discord, we were having a rowdy back and forth about what this Trump verdict means and what's going to happen and all this sort of thing. We were getting feisty and rowdy, as we like to do in there. So if that's something you would enjoy, then kingpill.com, go sign up and join the Discord and join the fun. Okay, so I'm sure by this point you know that what was our title? Trump, down on his luck, resorts to crime. The title, I will be laughing about this title for a week. That was all Cooper. We're sitting there, I'm like, all right, we need a title for the stream. And he popped that out, and I was like, oh, it's perfect. Because I just found a picture of Trump with his mugshot with cornrows. Trump's a real nigga now. He's got, someone tweeted something out about how he's got multiple baby mamas. He's got a ton of debt, and now he's a felon. So he's clearly the first black president. But so I hadn't even really been following the trial at all. I just would see updates from now and then, but I wasn't following it closely because it doesn't really matter to me. I think the ultimate outcome with respect to Trump and the presidential race, I don't think that this really strongly dictates it one way or the other. If anything, I think them actually proceeding with it the way that they did just strengthens his case. Which is exactly what's happening. We'll show you guys some of that here in just a minute. But I hadn't really closely followed the exact details of I'm like, it's very obvious. They're throwing all this shit at the wall. They're bending over backwards, trying to figure out some way to get themselves a conviction. So I'm like, I'd be very surprised if he's not convicted. I expected him to be convicted. And Glonk says, kid you not, I had a BoomerCon tell me that his prosecution was good because it would garner support from the black vote. You know what's funny is I've seen shit libs who are saying that. They're like, there's shit libs who are like upset about that this happened because it's going to make him more appealing to black voters. It is.
He's a felon.
Yeah, right. I'm like, I'm used to hearing this from the boomers. This is like Con Inc. 101. Like, oh, this year we're going to get the black vote. But now you've actually got the shit libs who hate Trump who are saying the same thing. Did you know, Cooper? Did you know that the Democrat Party is a plantation?
Did you know, Matt? Did you know that the demon rats are the real racists?
No, really? Did you know the party switched once upon a time? They were the opposite, and then they switched.
Yeah, so they were the actual slave owners.
Yeah. It is funny to look at the mentality that it's like in the North you have like the reason why the North was opposed to slavery is because they didn't want black people living with them. It wasn't like we have this moral problem with slavery. It was like if we have slavery, we're gonna have blacks here, so we don't want any more slave states because we want to have states that we can go to that don't have blacks in them. And
yeah, when we go on vacation to somewhere warm, we don't want any of them there.
Right. Oh, I think I showed you this earlier. Anthony Cumia's tweet. There was a headline for the New York Post that said that like this supplement will like radically improve your behavior or like make you behave better. And he said quick put it in the Popeyes fried chicken. Anthony Cumia is a good follow.
He is hilarious. One of the funniest people alive. And it was just like a picture of someone holding up like a fish oil capsule or something.
If you're taking fish oil, by the way, you should stop. It's a scam, and it's terrible for you.
Give it to your kids so they behave better.
Yeah, they behave better because it makes them all foggy brained, and then they're just like.
Did I tell you the story about my son sleepwalking the other night?
No.
So my wife is laying in bed with the little one, and they're on a bunk bed, and the boy is on the top bunk, and so my wife's on the bottom bunk with the little one, putting the little one to sleep, and my son gets down from the ladder, and she assumes he's just going pee or something like that. And then he puts his arms out like monkeys in a barrel, and just kind of like jumps out of the room like this. And she's like, the fuck was that? And then I'm in my bedroom, and I can see like through the doorway out in the hallway. I can see the light in the bathroom turn on, and then off, and then on, and then off, and then on, and then off, and then I hear a bunch of banging. And apparently, so my wife gets up to go check on him because she figures, oh, he's sleepwalking again. And she gets out into the hallway, and she sees him there holding her straightening iron like a sword, and he's just like turning around, bumping into the doors and stuff like that with it, and then. She says his name, and then he like looks up at her with like the surprised Pikachu face. He's like, oh. And then he's like, "You scared me." And she's like, "Okay, buddy, let's go to bed." And she takes the straightening iron from him, puts it down. He says, "Okay." Turns around, goes into the bathroom, and sits on the toilet. She's like, "No, let's go to bed." And he says, "Okay." And he gets up, and instead of turning right and going into the bedroom, he turns left and walks out into the living room. And he's just out there walking in circles. So then she goes and she kind of like ushers him back to bed. And at this point, I'm up. And then she starts filling me in on what happened. And then she decides to go take a piss or whatever. And she goes into the bathroom and she realizes the whole toilet is just covered in piss, the wall and everything. He just pissed while he was sleeping and just got it everywhere. That was awesome.
I actually just had I have my own funny story with my son, but it's kind of heartwarming. Just before I came up for the show here, Amy was like, come here. I want to try something on him. I'm like, okay. So we're doing experiments on my son. So I go and she sit down at the table. So I sit down next to him, and she brings us over some plates, and the plates are covered. And she says, she was like, all right, now. She goes, you know how we had some cookies, right? And Eastwood's like, yeah. She said, these are the last 2 cookies, okay? There's no more cookies after this. These are the last 2. I've got one for you and one for Daddy. And so she sets the plates down in front of us, and she says, okay, go ahead and uncover them. And so we lift our plates up, and he has 2 cookies on his plate, and I have none on mine. My plate's just empty. And he looks at his eyes get big, and he looks over at mine, and we're just sitting there looking at him. He looks over at mine, and he looks back at his, and he goes, here, Daddy, you can have one of mine. And gave me one of the cookies, and just like immediately without being prompted or anything. And so I've still got my cookie here. But
I would not have guessed that was the decision he'd make.
No, I wouldn't have either. And it's not the last of the cookies either. There's still a whole box of cookies over there. So my wife is performing emotional experiments on our son, and he's passing. Apparently, he's been longhoused.
He's ruined already.
Yeah. So for the actual details of this case, it's actually kind of interesting. It's funny how they figured out how to get this across. So this is from a Substack called The Scroll from May 30th. What is Trump even on trial for? So it says, shortly before the Scroll closed on Thursday, though by the time you read this, news might have changed, the jury in Donald Trump's Manhattan criminal trial was still locked in its second day of deliberations. At issue is whether Trump, who is as of now the frontrunner in the November election, will become the first former president to ever be convicted of a crime after leaving office. He's already the first to be charged. What crime? Well, on that score, we're confused. Much of the rest of the media is confused, and apparently the jury is confused too, since it's had to ask multiple times to be reminded of its instructions. In one of the many Kafkaesque turns of the trial, the judge, Juan Merchan, has not allowed the jurors to receive written copies of the jury instructions. Still, we'll do our best. So they have jury instructions, and I heard it's something like 50 or 70 pages or something like that of jury instructions. And he won't give them a print off of it. He sits there and he reads the whole thing from the bench, and then they have to like sit there and like madly scribble notes to remind themselves of what they're supposed to do. Then they go back and they deliberate for a while. Then they come back out again and they're like, okay, hey, can you give us a refresher on like the instructions here? Okay, yeah, let me pull that out. Let me read these to you guys again. Like, what the? So back to the piece. Trump faces 34 felony counts of falsifying business records for categorizing as legal expenses the reimbursements he made to his lawyer, Michael Cohen, for hush money payments to a porn star whom Trump allegedly slept with. Now, one might argue that paying your lawyer to arrange an NDA is, in fact, a legal expense, if an unsavory one, but let's roll with it. The bigger problem is that falsifying business expenses is a misdemeanor in New York. with a 2-year statute of limitations. The alleged crime took place in 2017, 6 years before Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg filed charges last April. But this misdemeanor, now here's where they do it. This misdemeanor can be raised to a felony with a 6-year statute of limitations if it was done in furtherance of another crime. So it's just a misdemeanor, so it's a 2-year statute of limitations. However, if this misdemeanor was committed in pursuance of another crime, then there's actually a 6-year statute of limitations, which means it just sneaks in under the wire.
They're really scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Right. So, and there's people who would have me believe that this is a well-oiled machine that has all of this under control, and they've planned all of this out, and they're going to make it happen no matter what.
All containment.
Right.
Doom.
So now get this. So the entire premise of this, when was the charges were filed? Last April. So over 13 months since the charges were filed, we have yet to know what the actual other crime is that would change this misdemeanor into a felony and put it still within the statute of limitations. So the exact nature of the other crime was not specified until closing arguments earlier this week. So they waited until closing arguments to how does a court case even proceed like this? Like, how do you have a court case where you're like debating over whether or not this is a crime and you haven't even presented the evidence that actually makes it the crime that it's being charged as? On Tuesday, prosecutors finally revealed that the other crime was, drumroll, a violation of a New York state election law that makes it a misdemeanor to, quote, conspire to promote the election of any person to public office by unlawful means. So the other crime is also a misdemeanor, which is only a crime if it involves another crime. In this case, whatever crime makes the election conspiracy unlawful. So you can conspire to get somebody elected, but you can't conspire to get somebody elected in an unlawful way. So this crime itself presumes the existence of another crime. And this is the two things that they've managed to staple together, but they don't reveal it until closing arguments, so you can't actually defend yourself. So what crime is that? Here, get this. Here, the judge told the jury they could take their pick between 3 options. Like, hey, jury, it might be this, might be this, might be this. Just pick one. Pick one. You know, if you think he did any of this stuff, just pick
or
one.
all 3.
Yeah, right. He actually told them, he said, if 4 of you land on crime 1, 4 of you land on crime 2, and 4 of you land on crime 3, meaning that 4 of you believe he did do crime 3, but he didn't do crime 1 or 2. 4 of you believe he did do 2, but not 3 or 1, and 4 of you believe he did do 1, but not 2 or 3. That in itself would be unanimous to convict.
Jeez.
So here are their 3 options. 1, a violation of the Federal Election Campaign Act. A Federal Election Campaign Act. Number 2, New York tax fraud. And number 3, falsification of other business records, which would mean that Trump falsified business records to conspire to steal the election by falsifying business records. One more time. Number 3 would be, it would mean Trump falsified business records to conspire to steal the election by falsifying business records.
That seems like a tautology.
Yes. In closing arguments, the prosecution leaned heavily on option 1, the FICA violation, on the theory that the NDAs were unreported campaign expenditures, since news of Trump's affairs would allegedly have hurt his campaign. Put aside for a moment that FICA can, by law, only be enforced by the Federal Election Commission and the Department of Justice, both of which declined to prosecute Trump. So, one more time. Option 1 is something that can only be prosecuted by one of these 2 federal bodies. Both of those federal bodies declined to prosecute him for it. And this is what the prosecution is leaning heavily on. This crime is a felony, not a misdemeanor, because it was done in furtherance of this other crime that we have no jurisdiction over prosecuting, that the people who do have jurisdiction over it already declined to prosecute. So that's option 1. Now get this. In 2022, the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee agreed to pay $113,000 in civil penalties to settle an FEC, which is one of those bodies, an FEC investigation into whether they misreported campaign expenditures. What was the alleged violation? It was that the Clinton campaign and the DNC had paid law firm Perkins Coie to hire Fusion GPS for the opposition research that eventually became the Steele dossier, and had reported these payments as legal expenses rather than campaign expenditures. For reasons we can't quite fathom, no state-level DA thought to inflate this alleged violation into a 34-count felony criminal indictment. And just so you know, the 34 counts, as I understand it, I could be wrong about this, but as I understand it, the reason there's 34 counts is because that $130,000 payment was broken up into 34 payments. So they're saying each of those payments was itself a felony count. That's how they get to 34. Writing in National Review, former federal prosecutor Andy McCarthy predicts that the trial has been so mismanaged by Judge Merchan, a Biden donor whose daughter, a Democratic consultant, earned $9.7 million from the Biden-Harris campaign in 2020, according to reporter Paul Sperry, that the jury may well return a conviction that will later be tossed on appeal. The American people, however, seem to be taking the trial with the seriousness it deserves. A recent poll from Quinnipiac University, highlighted by Harry Enton on CNN, showed that 46% of Americans believe Trump did something illegal with the hush money payments before the trial started, and 46% believe he did so now. Hasn't changed the mind on anybody. That suggests the effects of Bragg's circus trial on Americans' voting intentions has been precisely zero. Zip, zilch, nada. So, once again, these are the three options. One of them is a violation of the Federal Election Campaign Act, which is something that only a federal body has jurisdiction over, and the federal bodies that have jurisdiction over it have already declined to prosecute him for it. And if they were to prosecute him for it, the precedent is he gets a fine. That would be option one. Option two would be New York tax fraud. Apparently, that case must be pretty flimsy because they didn't really go after it. And number three is this preposterous tautology, where he falsified business records to conspire to steal the election by falsifying business records. So this is the way that this has proceeded. Now, I forgot to pull up this this picture here of the appeals court.
Seems above board to me.
Okay, here you go. So here is the Manhattan Appeals Court. You'll never believe it.
Yeah, this shit's going to the Supreme Court.
Right. So I mean, where it can go from here is obviously they're going to appeal, and so then the question is going to be, with something like this, like from the reading that I did, if you have someone who's never been convicted of a crime before, that is convicted of something like this, typically it's going to be probation. The most it could be is 4 years in jail, but that would like violate all precedent. It would be, you get probation for something like this, especially if you're like a wealthy person and because it's not something likely to end in prison time, it would be really unusual and unreasonable for the judge to recommend that the person be put in jail while they're awaiting it. And so there's a lot of people who are saying, no, so I don't think there's any way Trump's going to wind up in jail. His sentencing is in July, first week in July, I think, like something like that. I fully expect him to wind up in jail because someone else pointed this out. Like, it wouldn't to somehow say it doesn't merit him actually being jailed, just giving him just probation, would undermine the whole thing that they've built up. This whole thing has been, he paid off a porn star and he violated campaign law and he's a crook. You can't build it up like that and be like, yeah, we don't need to put him in jail though. I fully expect him to go to jail. And I think that like this is the ultimate, like, just not just stepping on your dick, but doing it over and over and over again. Like stepping on your dick and stumbling and stepping on it even harder. Because the effect of just this has already been pretty profound. Looking at just people generally commenting. So I have my regular Twitter account that everyone knows, and then I have another sports Twitter account where I'm following almost exclusively libs. And there's a lot of the decent libs who are just really, they're really appalled by the stain that Trump is upon the nation, and he's a crook and he's uncouth and all of this. they're like upset that Biden isn't doing enough for them and all this sort of thing. The way they're viewing this is, number one, this is unprecedented. We can't be having this political, clearly politically motivated prosecution precedent established. And number two, they're like, you're just making him more popular. Why? Like, stop making him more popular. You're making more people like him. This is not people who are inclined to like. These are people who hate Trump. This is the ultimate like TDS people. And even lots of them are starting to be like, you guys got to chill out. You're making him way too likable. You're even making me start to like him. So here's one big example.
Well, Emmanuel, how dare they jail that criminal?
So Justin, former Hillary 2016 donor Sean McGuire, explains why he contributed $300,000 to Trump after today's jury announcement. My friends are going to hate me. I'm willing to wade into this fire. Some of us need to be willing to. This is so he's a partner at Sequoia Capital. Shout out our PayPal Mafia thesis. He's also a extremely vocal Zionist, very outspoken Zionist, and he's donating $300,000 to Trump's campaign.
Why? Why is McGuire, so an Irishman, is like
Apparently, yeah.
got all his chips in with Israel?
Let me see what if we've got some background. Let's do an early life check here.
Jewish mom, maybe.
Yeah, that's probably what I'm guessing. Does he have a Wikipedia? He does not have a Wikipedia. So there was something down here about him and Elon. He's partnered with Elon Musk's successful Boring company since 2020. So he's right in that Elon Musk circle of influence. This is for someone like Elon, this is big news. There's one thing where they're going after his compensation package. Now, if something like this is allowed to continue, it sets the precedent for them to come after him and frame him for some measly little thing and arrest him and like seize his assets and take away his companies and all that sort of thing. So this is very, very real to someone like Elon. Which means all the people within his circle who are inclined to like and respect him, which is a huge number of people. I think people, especially in the political side of things, people don't appreciate just how much Elon is respected within the business and tech communities. Even people who don't agree with his politics, they really respect and like him a lot, and they see him as a very impressive person. So going after someone like Trump is one thing, but once it establishes this precedent where there's this precedent where they're going to start going after people like Elon, that's going to get people pretty worked up, and it's already happening. So yesterday, Trump's donation websites were all crashing, and I saw something that I think he brought in like $35 million in donations in one day, all from small donors, and like 30% of them were new donors as well. So Scott Adams has been on a rampage.
That's a guy, interesting arc. That guy's, I think he's redeemed himself.
I think so too. Yeah, he was all right. He was cool, and then he totally shit the bed with the COVID stuff. But I think he's redeemed himself. I think so too. He says, "Don't ask me to stand for the American flag until we get the country back. At the moment, it means nothing to me." And here's the thing about Scott: Scott is a really good proxy for the the hip boomer. So the boomer who is like tech savvy and like keeps up with the tech. Where there's plenty of them out there. He's a very good proxy for them because he's very much a boomer. He very much sees the world and relates to the world like a boomer, and he lives in that whole milieu, and he holds a lot of sway for a lot of them because a lot of them love Dilbert. He says, "I just donated to Trump. The donation page crashed from traffic. This is the hill to die on. I'm declining all business and travel involving New York City. The integrity of the jury system was all we had left," which I think is silly, but America is gone. Time to rebuild. I am perfectly on board with him pushing this message and influencing people to think this way. It is time to rebuild. Stop trying to save what's there. Go start building something new.
Oh, Melaforte says that he's married to a Gen Z or millennial chick.
He was. I don't know if he is now, but I know
That's
he had some hot like
Yeah.
OnlyFans thought basically.
Yeah,
It was probably
right.
before that, but she had that vibe online.
Yeah. Well, I guess when you're kind of a boomer and you're rich and I don't know, you want to get married, that's what you go for.
Uh-huh.
That, like,
Right.
checks out.
Uh-huh.
What else would like?
Here's David Sachs. Biden to allow Ukraine to use U.S. weapons to strike inside Russia.
Oh, good.
Like this is the
Glad they're
sort of
doing that.
thing. This is the sort of thing that you don't have to be some sort of rabid right-wing ideologue to see the trajectory of these things and be like, I want nothing to do with this. This is a matter now of where these people are recognizing how their own interests are being threatened. And so people will point at that and cynically be like, oh, see, they only care about their own shit. Yeah. Well, I want them to care about their own shit, because if they care about their own shit, then they in turn will be caring about my shit. I'm just gonna follow in their wake. I think the instinct here to maybe this comes down to my own like perception and expectation of Trump. That I've never seen Trump as he's the guy who's going to usher in the based regime. I've never seen that. Yeah, right. We're waiting on Barron for that. Someone was trying to come up with a name for him. I can't remember who it was, but they said they suggested like Barron the Tower or something else. They were trying to come up with like he needs a moniker. We're going to move into this age where men are known by their title.
Well, he hasn't done it. He hasn't really done anything cool yet. Like Richard the Lionheart, like killed a lion and ate its heart. So that's how he got.
That's pretty cool.
You know. I guess we'll have to wait. Bear needs to start doing some cool stuff. Like go kill a bear with your like a brick. Bear and bear brick. That's got a ring to it.
Baron, yeah, I can just see the headline now. Baron brains bear with brick.
Yeah, I mean Baron is a good name. Yeah, Kyle's right. Like Baron, that's a solid name. Just call him the Baron. That's badass. The Bloody Baron. That was a Witcher reference.
Here you've got Sean Davis. In 2016, the presidential race was decided based on candidates releasing lists of potential Supreme Court nominees. In 2024, I want to see lists of which Democrat officials are going to be put in prison. This is what happens when you cross the Rubicon. Woo! We're getting spicy. David Sachs, talking about Sean McGuire, he said, after Biden's disastrous presidency, Trump has a lot of supporters in Silicon Valley. Many are just afraid to admit it. But with each act of courage like this one, the dam begins to break. And this totally makes sense to me. Number one, because of the whole PayPal mafia thing that we've documented, and also because the libs in Silicon Valley overwhelmingly tilt toward this whole California ideology. They're overwhelmingly libertarian libs, and for that reason, they're very sensitive to the idea of unaccountable federal power. Now that they're starting to see that, they're like, okay, well, Trump seems kind of scary. But he's also kind of predictable. Like, you know what you're going to get out of him. And where this other thing is going, like, we have no idea what lines they're going to cross. So it's very easy for someone who's libertarian minded like that, but who actually exists within the system, to talk themselves into Trump being less threatening than whatever Trump is against.
The definition of baron is the lowest order of British royalty, referred to as a lord. Lord Baron. That's awesome.
That is good. Lord Baron. Yeah, I mean, like this is the natural role of political power, is for people to be like, don't really like the guy, don't agree with him on a lot, but he's the guy in power, so what he says goes. That's the proper posture toward this is the Romans 13 posture toward political power. And we're seeing a strong incentive in that direction. Now, again, I don't think Trump is going to be I've never thought Trump was going to be the usher in the based Caesarian regime or whatever. I've expected for a long time, even before the craziness of the last couple of years, I've expected that he's eventually going to become the mainstream option, because this is just the natural progression. Like, everything's naturally moving in this kind of mush central area where I think the regime is going to limp along for another few decades. And in order for that to happen, it's going to have to retreat to some kind of mushy, squishy thing where people are kind of keeping it on life support. And there has to be at least the illusion that it's still there. And Trump's the perfect guy to oversee that, to inspire some optimism and hope and start giving people a vision. But then you're going to have, it's very easy to make the connection between why the Zionists would be able to talk themselves into Trump, because he's not going to change a lot on that front. But so once you're seeing, what does John Brown say here? He says, I live in Silicon Valley. In 2020, I heard a lot of chattering leftist political talk when I was out and about. This past year, I've heard very little political talk. People are getting quiet here. Huh. So again, anecdotal, but that's when people get quiet, there's a reason for that.
We got a super chat, Matt.
Oh, let's scroll up here. NZXT Monster, $5. He says, lurked for a while. Thanks for the shows, boys. Keep it up. Thank you, sir. Welcome. I like that we have a monster who just came out from lurking in the shadows. That's a little foreshadowing.
Symbolism happens.
Uh-huh.
Are you, is your name Kyle?
Monster. Scott Adams said a lot of energy just got released. It's going somewhere. I think that's a good way to think about it. I think there was one other DEI got us to this place. Oh, did you hear this? There was supposedly a clip dropped of Donald Trump saying the N-word. Dozens of headlines from every major media outlet reporting on a decade-old story based on a mythical tape of Donald Trump saying the N-word that nobody has seen. So, someone said if this was actually true, do you think there's any possible way that we would just now be hearing about it? If there was a clip of Donald Trump saying I hope there is. I really, really hope that it's out there, and I hope we get to hear it. But I'd imagine that it's
we're talking about
AI.
Teflon Don, so it would certainly help him.
Yeah, he's like the ultimate anti-fragile guy. There was another tweet that Scott had said that I wanted to highlight, and I don't remember which one it was. I think we're almost here. We're a professional podcast.
This is good radio.
That's right. He's pretty wound up. Now, what's funny is to imagine, like, what I'd like to imagine is that Scott is, he's walking his dog, and then he goes back to the house and he makes himself some food, and he sits down and turns on a TV show, and he picks up his phone and he tweets, "This is the hill to die on. Send." And he puts it back down and he makes some popcorn and starts watching his TV show and looking at his notifications. That's kind of what I envision. I wonder if it's that. Or is he like sitting there like seething and like, "This is the hill to die on." This is another interesting thing. There was some sort of leading Democrat guy who put forth legislation saying that Secret Service protection would be denied anyone who had been convicted of a felony. So it's like, where do you come up with that? Where do you just, oh, hey, this is a good idea. We should do this. Let's have this. It's very obvious why they would present something like that. So this is the Fox regime, which is what we were talking about in the King Pill Discord last night. It's not that Fox regimes don't orchestrate violence. It's that they orchestrate violence. They don't participate in the violence themselves. They're trying to put the pieces together to get the violence to happen. They're like sitting there with the stick. Do something. Come on. Because Scott's piss off energy is like that's the last straw guy from The Office. His glasses getting all steamy.
Do that voice. Do that voice again.
That's the last straw.
That reminds me of my older brother who has autism. He has a lisp, and that's how he talks.
Is he the one that raps?
No.
Oh.
No, the other one.
Oh, okay.
The one who likes Bionicles.
Oh, okay, yeah. You have a lot of autistic brothers.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, this will be interesting having Trump on a town hall with Elon. I don't remember what the other. I was hoping I would see it and it would remind me, but I don't remember what the other one was. I was talking to some of the. I every once in a while I go talk to the normies a little bit and just have to hide my power level. And I was talking to him and was like, just the idea that you would have a jury trial for something like you would we have this like mystique around jury trials. Like he was tried by a it was a jury of his peers. Well, first of all, no, it wasn't, because like how do you get a peer to Donald Trump?
Yeah, you have to get you have to get billionaires, 12 billionaires.
Right, yeah. And then the idea that we have this like mystical or mythical belief that just because we put 12 people up there and they're somehow objective, that this is going to ensure that it's an unbiased outcome. Can you imagine being one of these jurors?
You know how easy it is to pay 12 people?
Well, even that, you wouldn't even need that. It would just be like, can you imagine one of these jurors being like, well, let's see. It looks like there's maybe 3 of us that are open to the idea that he's not guilty, but I know what's going to happen to me if the rest of them all say guilty and I say not guilty. I've already seen what's going to happen. At the very least, maybe I just say guilty and then maybe I get a book deal out of it or something. You know, maybe I could get something out of this. The idea that this is somehow unbiased on a trial of this magnitude, I would think the same thing would be the case with like Hillary Clinton. You're not going to have an unbiased jury. You might as well just have the judge just make a ruling.
Yeah, you gotta. Well, and the 12 people who are on this jury of your peers are the subset of your peers who were too stupid to get out of jury duty.
Right.
So, you know.
Yeah, jury duty itself selects for like bored old people who don't have anything better to do. All right, so there was another interesting story that dropped today that I haven't seen a lot of people talking about, but I would imagine we're going to hear more about it in the near future. We've talked about Eric Prince on the show before, kind of in the same breath as we've discussed some of these other PayPal Mafia types of guys. He's come on the scene recently, started his own podcast. He's been doing the podcast circuit. And I've heard some people say that they think that the only thing he's up to is he just has this new phone, this new like super secure phone that, as I understand it, actually isn't really that secure. But it's his secure phone that he's pitching, because he pitches it in every one of his conversations. It seems very clear to me that Eric Prince is up to a lot more than just trying to hawk his phone. This is a very serious guy. If you listen to him talk, this is a very serious guy. Anybody who's ever known him will tell you that he is no nonsense. That he's an extremely well-educated, very intelligent guy who can speak at length about minute details of all sorts of things, from geopolitics to military strategy to history to legal theory. There's all kinds of different stuff. He's also he's a devout Catholic with 12 children, I believe.
Nice. And
he's got a pretty interesting story. Go listen to if you want to know more about him, listen to his conversation he had with Patrick Bet-David on Patrick Bet-David's show. He was also on Tucker Carlson recently. I have that in the queue to listen to. As Kyle says, yeah, it's Eric fucking Prince. The guy is the closest thing we have today to like a General MacArthur, or this like military, like noble, honorable military figure who men would gladly lay down their lives for. If you talk to any military guy about Eric Prince, you're going to see like heart eyes. Like their eyes are going to turn into that emoji with the heart eyes. So when Eric Prince starts making moves, he's the type of guy that you want to listen to. There was a recent conversation on Pete Quinones' show with Charles Spadil and Tim Kelly and Jose El Nino. And they were talking about Prince, and kind of they were debating back and forth, like, is Prince is he the guy that you would want as the Caesar, or would you want him as like the right hand man to the Caesar? Is he the alpha leading figure, or is he the swordsman? And I'm more inclined to see him as the swordsman. I think that he's not necessarily the guy you would want in the ultimate seat of power. You would want him as the right hand man for that ultimate seat of power. But if you got that, he is the best possible person for that role. So he's been making the rounds lately, and I happen to know that he's had conversations with people not far removed from us. He's definitely, we're kind of right around in his same milieu, and he's thinking a lot of the same things that we are.
Trump raises 52.8 million in 24 hours.
52.8 million?
Yep.
Jeez. That's that's
a lot of money.
That's a lot of fucking money. It really shouldn't be surprising. The entire game is clear now. And anybody who likes America, who likes being thought of as an American, who wants to be an American, who wants America to persist, who wants America to be strong and powerful and prosperous, even vaguely, like even if that's just something that you've got some sort of sentiment for, it's very clear that there's two ways the election can go. And one way is absolutely assured, guaranteed that that sort of thing is never going to happen. The other way, there's at least the possibility. All of the, let's just return to normalcy people. Now, Trump is the normal candidate. Trump is the return to normalcy guy. He's become the conservative mainstream option, which is exactly what I was predicting a couple of years ago. That by the time we get around to 2024, I didn't think it was going to get this off the rails. But by the time we get around to 2024, Trump is going to be a mainstay. He's no longer the weird, scary outsider. Now he's just the mainstay. I did have a really interesting conversation. I wasn't super involved in it. I was mostly just party to it with a bunch of the West Coast shit libs in one of the sports communities that I'm in, where they were talking about this, and a couple of them were really upset because this was a couple weeks ago. They were like, well, when he was president before, he wanted to bomb Mexico, and now he's spent 4 years. He's going to be able to get he's gotten all the people who blocked him before. He's gotten all of them out of the way, and he's just got sycophants and yes men around him. And when he gets back in, nobody's going to stand in the way of him bombing Mexico. And there's a friend of mine who's not remotely a Trump fan was like, "What are you talking about? Bombing Mexico? What do you mean?" And so one of them went and they got a link to an article and they posted it. And it was Trump talking about, he'd asked his advisors if it was possible, since the cartels had been designated terrorist groups, if it was possible to do targeted drone strikes or targeted missile strikes on the cartels. And somehow this got translated into Trump bombing Mexico.
Just indiscriminately sending missiles into you've got this abuela down there making her tortillas in some shithole village somewhere. And just boom, baby guts everywhere.
Oh, just thatched huts just launched into the sky. Yeah. Well, Emmanuel, can you confirm this for us? Can you confirm this narrative? And so then, of course, they pull up the Mexican president, AMLO, who's like neo-lib incarnate. And they're like, see, AMLO really didn't like this. He didn't want him to do that. And I'm like, oh, really? You mean the ally to the cartels, the political front for the cartels didn't want the cartels getting drone striked by Trump? Huh, imagine that. Well, Emmanuel says, tortillas will be flying, bombs are not. Is this like a statement of the fortitude of the Mexican people? Like you could make Mexico City look like Gaza and you would still have the abuelas there, like tossing their tortillas. Anyway, so we've got this story here with Eric Prince. His podcast is called Off Leash. So that's why this is a really clever headline in the New Republic. Eric Prince's podcast is called Off Leash, and they used Off Leash in the headline. Because here's what it is. Inside the secret global far-right group chat, they're off the leash. Guys, the scary guys are off a leash. Get them on leash again, guys. This is scary. Military contractor Eric Prince started a private WhatsApp group for his close associates that includes a menagerie of right-wing government officials, intelligence operatives, arms traffickers, and journalists. We got their messages.
This is going to be incredibly gay, isn't it?
Oh, yes. In his book.
Can't wait.
Yeah, here we go. Dramatic reading. In his book, In the Garden of Beasts, Love, Terror, and American Family in Hitler's Berlin, Eric Larson cites a cable sent to the State Department in June 1933 by a U.S. diplomat posted in Germany that provided a far more candid assessment of the Nazi leadership than the one that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's administration was then conveying to the public. Quote, with few exceptions, the men who are running this government are of a mentality that you and I cannot understand, read the cable, which was written 5 months after Adolf Hitler was appointed chancellor. Some of them are psychopathic cases and would ordinarily be receiving treatment somewhere. Imagine a lib goes out and encounters people who don't share his lib values, and he thinks that they're psychopaths and need to be interned and receive treatment. I've thought about that passage from the cable many times over the past several weeks as I've been reading excerpts from a private WhatsApp group chat established last December by Eric Prince, the founder of the military contractor Blackwater and younger brother of Betsy DeVos. Betsy DeVos or Betsy DeVos?
DeVos.
Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education during President Donald Trump's administration, who invited around 650 of his contacts in the United States and around the world to join. Prince, here you go. Here's the parenthetical thought that Michael Malice talks about. Prince, who has a long track record of financing conservative candidates and causes and extensive ties to right-wing regimes around the world, named the group, which currently has around 400 members, Off Leash, the same name as the new podcast that he'd launched the month before. Among the group's hottest topics, the Biden regime, which a consensus, the quote, Biden regime, which a consensus of off-leash participants who weighed in view as an ally of Islamic terrorists and other anti-American forces that needs to be crushed along with them and its partners in the deep state, such as former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Mark Milley, who, quote, deserves to burn in hell, Lara Logan shared with the group chat. Now, first of all, I like to highlight here. So we've got a group of 400, what is this? Right-wing government officials, intelligence operatives, arms traffickers, and journalists. And they're using, quote, the Biden regime. Is it just me, or was the term Biden regime something that was really only used kind of in our little circles of Twitter a few years ago? Like referring to it as the regime. This seems like something that's relatively new. Number two, the shortcomings of democracy that invariably resulted from extending the franchise to ordinary citizens who are easily manipulated by Marxists and populists. The West is at best a beautiful cemetery, lamented Sven von Storch, whose aristocratic German family fled the country after World War II to Chile, where their son was raised before returning to the land of his ancestors, where he married the granddaughter of the Third Reich's last de facto head of state, who was convicted at Nuremberg.
Oh, wow, what a story.
Yeah.
You know, that was a based household to grow up in.
Yeah, no kidding. And I like how it's like, let's see, how can we tie him into the Nazis? Just making the illusion that they're an aristocratic German family who went to South America. That's not enough. We got to figure this out. So he married the granddaughter, granddaughter of the Third Reich's last de facto head of state, who was convicted. Okay, there we go. We made the connection.
Got it.
He's a crypto Nazi, you guys.
Yeah, we're like 5 people removed, but that's enough.
Yeah. So next, so we've got the crypto Nazi, right? Here's the next one. Israel-Palestine, a problem that Michael Udelson, Prince's business partner at Unplugged, which markets an allegedly super secure smartphone, said should be handled by napalming Hamas's tunnel network. Quote, I would burn all those bastards and have everything above ground and everything left of Gaza collapse into this fiery hell pit and burn, he wrote.
Fucking bomb in Mexico. Napalm.
Napalm Gaza!
Glass him.
Okay, here you go. Here's another one. The Houthi rebels in Yemen, whom Yoav Goldhorn, who was an Israeli intelligence officer until last year and now works for a Tel Aviv-based security contractor headed by former senior national security veterans, thinks should be, quote, dealt with as soon as possible to ensure they don't grow from, quote, an inconvenience to a festering mess that will eventually require an entire limb to be amputated. And most of all, Iran, which participants agreed, with a few exceptions, also needed to be wiped out. Sagar Erica Kasrayi, a former staffer for Republican Representative Trent Franks when he served on the House Armed Services Committee, and whom, according to her LinkedIn profile, she advised on Middle East issues, urged that the Islamic Republic's clerical leaders be targeted by weaponized drones that, quote, take them out like flies.
This has got to be a fun chat.
No kidding. Not all of the group's members are conspiracy theorists in the mold of Logan, the former CBS correspondent. I know many people who are in roughly the same political ballpark as the average off-leash participant, including some of the chat group's members, who are razor sharp, even if I strongly disagree with a lot of their opinions. I don't know Prince other than having been in the same room with him on a few occasions, but we have mutual acquaintances who say he's not a one-dimensional evil mercenary as typically portrayed. So he's not a one-dimensional evil mercenary. He's just a multi-dimensional evil mercenary. But he's brilliant and funny, and over drinks greatly prefers to discuss business and history rather than expound upon the latest developments in right-wing political circles. Frank Gallagher, a former Marine who once provided security for Henry Kissinger and who worked in a high-level position at Blackwater in Iraq following the 2003 U.S.-led invasion, isn't a fan of Prince but offered a similar assessment. We had issues from time to time, but I can't deny that he's extraordinarily smart, he recounted. When he came to Iraq, he'd cover 10 topics, and he had command over all of them. All of which makes Off-Leash arguably more concerning because the group can't be dismissed as merely a collection of harmless cranks. Many of the participants, though not all household names, are wealthy and politically wired, which makes their incessant whining in the group chat about being crushed under the boot heel of the deep state particularly grating. And they will collectively become wealthier and more influential if Trump wins the November election. How's that for framing? That's especially true of the Americans in the group, but the same holds for the international figures because the global right will become immensely more powerful and emboldened if the former president returns to the White House. That prospect is a source of great hope to off-leash participants. Trump, Orban, Malay, it's happening, former Blackwater executive John Ladelfa posted to the group during a trip to Argentina on December 4. Hey, it's my birthday. 2 days after Prince created it. Around the globe, we are the sensible, the rational, the majority. Don't give in to fear. We will defeat the Marxists. He's just like me, for real.
I'm that guy. I'm him.
Uh-huh.
That's me. Yeah.
Here's another good character. His hopes were shared by many other off-leash participants, among them Horatiu Potra, a Romanian mercenary who has recently been operating in the mineral-rich, conflict-plagued Democratic Republic of Congo. Quote, the globalists want to control the entire planet, and the only chance to get rid of them is a spark from a great power, the USA, Potra wrote. Surely there will be a strong man like Eric who will initiate it, otherwise there is no chance of regaining our freedom. If this spark is started, all countries will follow suit. We are waiting for the signal, the spark. So, I mean, I think the biggest takeaway from this is we have our little group chats where we are all like tiptoeing around Fed posting on the regular. And it turns out that there is a counter elite that is forming that has a group chat where they are outright Fed posting. They aren't even holding back one bit. Now, I know that there's one narrative that I saw. A lot of people actually weren't even talking about this. But one of the things that I saw was people saying essentially like this is a honeypot. Like this is Eric Prince's job. Is he's got all these people together in a honeypot and he's gonna hand them over. And I would just like to say that if you think Eric Prince of all fucking people pulled together a group of people on WhatsApp to discuss all of this stuff, thinking that, it was not going to get caught, it's preposterous. If anything, the Eric Prince would be the one who's leaking this. Eric Prince is the one who's trying to get out ahead of this, which squares with, I think, a pattern that we're seeing develop among these different counter elite figures. They're signaling to each other across the globe like, hey, you seeing what I'm seeing? Yeah? This can't stand, right? Like this, there needs to be something here. We got to step up and do something. This is the sentiment that is recurring across all these different stories. The PayPal Mafia guys, the Eric Prince affiliated people. You had Bukele posted a tweet yesterday when all of this was all the news about Trump was dropping. He just said Maginot Line, which is kind of interesting because the Maginot Line was the heavily fortified border with France that they heavily fortified essentially to keep the Germans out. And so it's this super heavily fortified thing that marked like the boundary point, and the Germans just went right around it. So I'm wondering if what exactly were his implications with that? Is it an interesting cryptic tweet? Is he saying that the Constitution is a Maginot Line? Is he saying now is the time to pass the Maginot Line, sort of like crossing the Rubicon? It's interesting. Ryan Isaac says, dude has a privacy phone, so he's not stupid, even if the phone isn't the bee's knees. Right. I think that the dude was the head of Blackwater. I think he understands things like encryption and privacy and the nature of the regime. And yeah, like this is another one of these things like Tucker, where you just have to go listen to these guys talk. And it requires really tying yourself into a pretzel to conclude that these guys are somehow, containment. They're very clearly not.
We got a Skitto in the chat.
Oh, hold on, buddy. We've got something for you here in just a little bit. So just a little bit here, I want to show the types of people who are in this. So collectively, Off Leash provides an informal virtual gathering place for current and former political officials, national security operatives, activists, journalists, soldiers of fortune, weapons brokers, black bag operators, grifters, convicted criminals, and other elements of the U.S. and global far right. The roster of invitees includes icons of the MAGA ecosphere, such as Tucker Carlson, the most revered figure among group chat participants, with the exception of the supreme leader himself. Kimberly, they just can't help to make these guys sound awesome. Kimberly Guilfoyle, the longtime fiance of Donald Trump Jr., and retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, Trump's convicted, then pardoned first national security advisor. Flynn has participated, Carlson only minimally, and Guilfoyle not at all. Current and former lawmakers and aides, such as Tennessee Congressman Mark Green of the House Freedom Caucus, Vish Burra, who was director of operations for Congressman George Santos, and Stuart Seldowitz, the national security advisor to Barack Obama from 2009 to 2011, who was arrested last November after harassing an Egyptian halal street cart vendor in New York City for 2 weeks, during which time he called him a terrorist and said, if we killed 4,000 Palestinian kids, it wasn't enough. Oh, man. So let's see here. There was one point in here that I wanted to pull out that was funny. Many other off-leash participants have also stated that they don't view the group chat as merely a forum to exchange ideas, but want it to become a vehicle to put their theories into action. If we band together, we can damage the other side like no one has ever seen before, exclaimed Jeff Sloat, who worked with the U.S. Army PSYOPs unit in Central America during the Reagan era. I like that these guys are like, this is like the ultimate boomer posting. If we band together, we can damage the other side like no one has ever seen before. Okay, this is the part here. So he's really painted this picture of like, these aren't just your normal crackpots. These are rich, wealthy, powerful crackpots. They're they're crypto Nazis. Look how scary they are. Now get this.
I like how they're calling them Nazis, and then on the other hand, just like they're like highlighting all of like the pro-Zionist takes.
Right.
You know, yeah. On one hand, they're Nazis, but they also support Israel.
Yeah, they're like Nazi Jews.
Yeah.
Well, Emmanuel, I get that reference. He says, I don't want to disclose how much I learned of the group chat and the nature of its discussions, but I will say that multiple sources in the U.S. and elsewhere shared information, including 2 journalists who I discovered had learned about Off Leash, which nearly gave me a heart attack for fear I'd lose my scoop. Participants did occasionally express concerns about security, but their worries were mostly centered on the possibility that their conversation was vulnerable to hackers. It apparently never occurred to any of them that their confidentiality might be compromised, not by sophisticated cyber warfare specialists, but by old-fashioned leakers, which was virtually inevitable given the group size. I'm sure they just never expected that someone might leak it. There's 400 of them in a group, and they never expected that someone might leak it.
Yeah,
people are so naive.
Journalists and shit in there,
Yeah.
obviously.
But I think it's great that he sees this as the rise of like brutal fascism, and he's really worried that he's gonna lose his scoop. This is the perfect depiction of the Capitol Hill journo, and of course his name is Ken Silverstein.
I'm interested in anything a Silverstein has to say.
Yeah. So, anyways, I don't think there's much else to say about that in particular. It's just
That was fun.
yeah, something to keep in the back of your mind and watch for. Just keep an eye on Eric Prince and what he's doing. There was this tweet here I wanted to highlight from good follow on Twitter, Jim Sharp. I have no idea his handle is pro wrestling strong. And there's no vowels in the last two words. He says, regarding the Eric Prince story, he said, between this and Silicon Valley tech billionaires dropping 100K plus donations to Trump, a counter elite is forming along with a new high-low alliance. MAGA populist on the bottom and the tech bros / military contractors at the top. The ingredients getting thrown into the soup pot for wild times. I believe that is exactly true. Okay. So we have another little interesting tidbit that we wanted to get into that involves a massive shift in topic here. So if I was a good podcaster, I would have opened this up ahead of time.
Should I put another Zin in?
Yeah, put another Zin in.
Not by the hair of my Zinny Zin.
Okay, so
You know what that's from?
what? The
Little
Three
Red
Pigs?
Riding Hood. Oh, is it? Yeah,
Or is it
you might be
Little Red?
right.
Yeah. Not huff and you puff and it'll blow your ass. Yeah. Three Little Pigs.
Okay, Three Little Pigs. Yeah.
I thought you meant the Zenny Zen part itself. Okay, so this will be why don't you take the lead on some of this here? How do you want to approach this here subject?
Is this that like
The Reddit thread?
Reddit series from like a decade ago or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Just start reading through it.
yeah, why not? We'll kind of chase some rabbits, talking about kind of schizo stuff and cryptids and shit like that.
Okay, then let's see here. Hold that thought for just a minute. My bladder's going to explode, but I want to be able to go for another little bit here. So
Okay.
you vamp
Talk to
and
me.
entertain.
Okay. What's up, guys? How's it going? How's everybody doing? What is up? Bird up. Snail down. I'm horrible at doing this. What is Bigfoot real? Are aliens real? Is the Michigan Dogman real? What about like skinwalkers? What do you guys think? Is this real stuff? When am I getting baptized? Are you talking to me, Ryan Isaac? That's a good question. No idea. Whenever my priest thinks that's a good idea. Yes, sir, me. Yeah. Well, it was kind of complicated because I was, let's see. It's been like over 3 years when I first started becoming so I was into I started getting into Orthodoxy, and I spent a year just kind of obsessing about it, reading everything I could get my hands on. And then it was probably a year before I actually showed up to the parish for the first time. Then that was probably a little over 3 years ago. Probably another year and a half, little over that goes by. I become a catechumen. Would have been nativity of last year, I think. And then fast forward to maybe 6 months ago or something, maybe a little more than that, my wife and kids became catechumens. And then recently, for a number of reasons, we've changed parishes. So we were going to a Rocor parish, now we're going to an Antiochian parish. So as far as I understand, I'm still a catechumen. I don't know how that works, changing parishes when you're still part of the catechumenate. That's something that priest is going to talk to the bishop. It's a whole complicated thing, but basically starting over at a new parish. So, I mean, I'm already over a year and a half into the catechumenate. I don't see the end coming anytime soon. I'm not in any particular hurry. So, could be another, I don't know, another year, another 2 years. So, it's been a long one for me. Very early church. So, I hope that satisfied you, Mr. Isaac. Welcome back, Matt.
Well, thank you. I am going to just retweet this now here and say, still live, come join us as we discuss creepypasta. So that is what we are going to discuss now. We got some nice creepypasta for you guys. One of the guys in the Discord shared this Reddit link the other day of some of his favorite creepypasta stories, and I proceeded to read all of them, and then decided to stay awake and never.
Yeah, me
sleep
too.
again.
I decided to read them all and just be spooked for a couple hours laying in bed. Like, what was that noise?
Yeah.
Hearing shit out my window.
Yeah. Okay, so Euthanasia says, I was told to remind you to talk about carbon last time. You've been reminded. Okay, real quick, before we do the creepypasta. The whole carbon dating thing, one question that I have that I would ask,
right.
say, Randall Carlson, if I had the opportunity to, would be if carbon dating has to do with this idea of, essentially like sunlight that's been absorbed into the whatever the organic substances that they're dating, and they're using that based on to try to calculate the age of it, then wouldn't some kind of massive catastrophe that drastically changes the composition of the atmosphere, wouldn't that affect like the amount of sunlight that passes through? Or wouldn't it have something to do with it in some way? I'm a retard with this stuff. I don't know exactly how it all works, but I know that it's related to sunlight and exposure to sunlight over X amount of time. And
Not to mention, if you actually take, the Bible seriously, as I'm wont to do, and the earth was flooded.
yeah,
I mean, I don't know exactly when that. I don't care. The whole dating of the age of the earth thing is like, it makes me want to roll my eyes back up into my head. I could not care less. Whether it's 6,000 or 12,000 years ago or whatever, 4,000 years ago, don't you think that would, like, anything before that? Don't you think those records would be kind of unreliable?
right. I mean, even with the premise of, say, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, where you have like pieces of a broken comet plunging through the atmosphere and plowing into the Earth, causing massive tsunamis and forest fires all over the globe, and plunging us into a nuclear winter, and you have like the projectile matter that goes back up, like you have a comet plunge into a glacier, it's going to shoot stuff up into the atmosphere. I feel like this would, maybe even the force of something that big burning through the atmosphere, I feel like this would change it somehow. Is this something that's considered at all?
I've heard of that. Is it good? I've heard of that game. I had to explain to Matt a few weeks ago what the backrooms were, because he wasn't familiar with the backrooms or any SCP stuff, and honestly, the SCP stuff has gotten kind of gay, and the backrooms has been ruined because everyone wants to put monsters and blood in them, but that's not the idea. The idea. So you did I explain the backrooms to you?
I don't remember that at all.
Okay, it's basically like the idea. It's one of these creepypasta kind of things where deep internet lore where the idea is kind of like, you know what like no clipping is in video games, right? Where you like clip outside of the map and now you're
Yeah.
walking around, you can see the map. It's like that. They're like, the idea is kind of what would happen if you like no clipped out of reality,
Okay.
and then you just wake up, or you're just there and you're in the back rooms, which is just like a bunch of empty office space, and it never ends.
Huh.
And that's it. That's it. There's no monsters. Like people recently have gotten all like, ooh, monsters, jump scares. They leaned into that, but the original idea was just like, what's the term? There's a term for it to describe that feeling. It's kind of the same feeling you get when you're like the last person at the mall and you're getting ready to leave, or that kind of just eerie feeling.
Yeah.
Where it's not like you're in danger per se, but just everything feels kind of weird. You just feel kind of creeped.
Unsettled. Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of unsettled. It's like that. And
Huh.
apparently I was reading about a game on Steam where somebody was kind of fed up with all the monster shit that people have ruined the back rooms with. They made a game where you're kind of going through the back rooms or just walking through stuff. There's no monsters. You're just there to experience just the eeriness.
So there's no premise to it. You just walk around.
Yeah, you're just exploring. It's just an exploring game.
Huh.
Just walking around.
Interesting.
Just to feel, you're just in the mood to feel unsettled.
Uh-huh.
I guess.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, if you're in the mood to feel unsettled, we've got just the thing for you. So this is a fantastic thread. There's ended up being like 8 parts to this, I think.
Yeah.
So the headline is, I'm a search and rescue officer for the U.S. Forest Service. I have some stories to tell. I wasn't sure where else to post these stories, so I figured I'd share them here. I've been a search and rescue officer for a few years now, and along the way I've seen some things that I think you guys will be interested in. I have a pretty good track record for finding missing people. Most of the time they just wander off the path or slip down a small cliff and they can't find their way back. The majority of them have heard the old stay where you are thing and they don't wander far. But I've had 2 cases where that didn't happen. Both bother me a lot, and I use them as motivation to search even harder on the missing persons cases I get called on. The first was a little boy who was out berry picking with his parents. He and his sister were together, and both of them went missing around the same time. Their parents lost sight of them for a few seconds, and in that time, both the kids apparently wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us, and we came out to search the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly, and when we asked her where her brother was, she told us that she'd been taken away by the bear man. She said he gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, that he wanted to play with her brother for a while. The last she saw of her brother, he was riding on the shoulders of the bear man and seemed calm. Of course, our first thought was abduction, but we never found a trace of another human being in that area. The little girl was also insistent that he wasn't a normal man, but that he was tall and covered in hair, like a bear, and that he had a weird face. We searched that area for weeks. It was one of the longest calls I've ever been on, but we never found a single trace of that kid. The other was a young woman who was out hiking with her mom and grandpa. According to the mother, her daughter had climbed up a tree to get a better view of the forest, and she'd never come back down. They waited at the base of the tree for hours, calling her name before they called for help. Again, we searched everywhere, and we never found a trace of her. I have no idea where she could have possibly gone because neither her mother nor her grandpa saw her come down. So those are a little creepy. Let's go on. This one, these are just kind of sad. Try to find another creepy one. Here we go. I was teamed up with another SAR officer because we'd received reports of bears in the area. We were looking for a guy who hadn't come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to, and we ended up having to do some serious climbing to get to where we figured he'd be. We found him trapped in a small crevasse with a broken leg. It was not pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days, and the leg was very obviously infected. We were able to get him into a chopper, and I heard from one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine, and when he'd gotten to the top, a man had been there. He said the guy had no climbing equipment, and he was wearing a parka and ski pants. He walked up to the guy, and when the guy turned around, he said he had no face. It was just blank. He freaked out and ended up trying to get off the mountain too fast, which is why he'd fallen. He said he could hear the guy all night climbing down the mountain and letting out these horrible muffled screams. That story bothered the hell out of me. I'm glad I wasn't there to hear it. Okay, here's another one.
Oops.
That made me jump. One of the scariest things I've ever had happen to me involved the search for a young woman who'd gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late at night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up under a large rotted log. She was missing her shoes and pack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, and we were able to get her to walk with us back to base ops. Along the way, she kept looking behind us and asking us why, quote, that big man with black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to base, the more agitated this woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point, she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She wasn't going to go with him, she said, and she wouldn't give us to him. We finally got her to keep moving, but we started hearing these weird noises coming from all around us. It was almost like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't really know how else to describe it. When we were within sight of base ops, the woman turns to me and her eyes are about as wide as I can imagine a human could open them. She touches my shoulder and says, he says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck. I have a very small scar on the base of my neck, but it's mostly hidden under my collar, and I have no idea how this woman saw it. Right after she says it, I hear that weird coughing right in my ear, and I just about jumped out of my skin. I hustled her to ops, trying not to show how freaked out I was, but I have to say I was really happy when we left the area that night. Okay, here's $9.99 from Jackalope. He says, check out the Mormon legend of Bigfoot being a descendant of Cain.
Oh, interesting.
That's a good one. Okay, we'll look that one up here in a minute. There's a couple other stories here that I don't remember which parts they're in, but we'll go through and find them, because some of these are a little more mundane. Some of these are mind-bending. So this one here, so this is a theme. This is the last one I'll tell, and it's probably the weirdest story I have. Now, I don't know if this is true in every SAR unit, but in mine, it's sort of an unspoken regular thing we run into. You can try asking about it with other SAR officers, but even if they know what you're talking about, they probably won't say anything about it. We've been told not to talk about it by our superiors, and at this point, we've all gotten so used to it that it doesn't even seem weird anymore. On just about every case where we're really far into the wilderness, I'm talking 30 or 40 or 40 miles, at some point, we'll find a staircase in the middle of the woods. It's almost like if you took the stairs in your house, cut them out, and put them in the forest. I asked about it the first time I saw some, and the other officer just told me not to worry about it, that it was normal. Everyone I asked said the same thing. I wanted to go check them out, but I was told very emphatically that I should never go near any of them. I just sort of ignore them now when I run into them because it happens so frequently. Now, Cooper, you said that you've actually seen stairs like that.
I have seen stairs like that. I mean, okay. I'll condition that by saying I live in Michigan. It's pretty common to see like foundations and broken down houses and things like that. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just kind of like retroactively being like, "Oh, dude, I saw the stairs." But I have seen stairs out in the middle of the woods before, and it was kind of weird. And I'm not the only one. This is an experience that people have had. Even some people in our Discord have had this experience. One of them, former military guy doing like ops and stuff out in the woods or training stuff, and seeing stairs. Coming back later, stairs are gone.
That's another thing, is that people see them and then they go back to see them again and they're gone. Okay.
So, what is that? What do you think that is, Matt? Let's speculate.
I don't have the foggiest, honestly. I mean, I think with all of these stories, you get there's running themes through all of them. They all have to do with being, or almost all of them have to do with being like super remote, like really far out in weird places. And there's tons and tons of lore about the kind of the further you get out away from civilization, the weirder things get. That's where all the weird stuff lives.
Yeah, right.
So
all the monsters are over there in the fringe. That's where the dog-headed people are, you know?
Right. And you and I had a long conversation about this the other day. But you know, it's interesting that there almost seems to be like different levels of demonic activity. Because I see these sorts of things and I automatically am like, yeah, this is some sort of, especially because of how sinister and malevolent, you get the smell of death often associated with these stories. It very clearly seems like some kind of demonic behavior. But it seemed like the question I was asking you, we were talking about, was like, what's the motivation here from the demon's perspective? What's the motivation to be like, you know, I'm hiding out here in the woods, and if somebody just happens to come by, then we're gonna fuck with this guy and like freak him out or kill him. But it just seems, I don't know, it seems inefficient. And there are a lot of stories about in all kinds of ancient legends with different people groups of like spiritual entities that are kind of neutral. Like they're not, they're not angels or demons. They're just sort of like tricksters. Maybe like, like leprechauns or fairies or the djinn. So I mean, I'd imagine I can't really get my mind around why a demon who is like, he already knows what his outcome's going to be, and he's like, I'm just going to go. I'm going to spend the time that I have out hanging out in the woods, fucking with people. I mean, I don't know. I don't presume to know the thinking of demons.
The idea that the demons are out in like the wilderness or the desert, like that. I understand that. I understand that idea. I understand the malevolence, and I guess what I don't understand is kind of the like you were saying, like there seems to be like some of these phenomena that seem more neutral, where it's not like expressly malevolent. Where you'll have some cases where like they, someone's out in the woods or out in the middle of nowhere and they encounter some weird entity and it's like helpful,
right?
And it's like, okay, I mean, there's a couple different ways you could look at that. You could be like, okay, this is. You could just say it's all demons, and the ones that are helpful are just trying to like dupe you and lead you into kind of some delusional beliefs, which is possible. I'm also open to the theory that there are entities that exist that aren't like angels or fallen angels. They're just other species that just like exist differently than us. Like maybe they're just like, that you start getting galaxy brained when you start talking about this. Like maybe they're just like different dimensions, dude. But like maybe,
but maybe they are. Yeah.
Yeah. Think about that. Like what if you're like a fourth dimensional being or something like that? Like the way you would interact with a 3-dimensional being would be. Well, it'd be very weird to the 3-dimensional being. Like you'd be flipping in and out of vision and you'd be able to go through walls and stuff like that. You'd be able to see everywhere around me.
That's one thing I thought. I went down a deep rabbit hole on Bigfoot stuff when I was like in my early teens, kind of, and I just scared the shit out of myself. Especially since I lived in an area where there were lots of Bigfoot sightings reported. But that had been kind of my working theory for a long time, was that a lot of these cryptids are, at least like a Bigfoot, are somehow they're like another species. They're another species of creature that just happens to have one of their characteristics, that they've got a weird relationship with time and space. That they, it's not that they're demonic per se. They're just some sort of weird creature. I mean, is like the whole thing with like Neanderthals and the Denisovans and stuff. Like there's evidence of different hominid type species. And I don't think there's any reason to necessarily, like today we live with species that you would call roughly hominid, like the great apes and everything.
And some of these, the taxonomy, these are constructs as well.
Right.
So you gotta keep that in mind.
But I'm saying that like there's if there were other types of extinct or mostly extinct species that are some kind of weird hominid or something like that, and they just happen to be super private, and they have some sort of elevated level of reasoning capacity. Like imagine just like a really smart ape or something that just by its own nature, it makes itself very difficult to find and get in contact with. And then when people do happen to see it, it's out in these sorts of places. I've been completely convinced that I don't think that Bigfoot is a hoax entirely. I've seen more than enough evidence of stuff that would be very, very difficult, like impossible to fake, that where there's like no motivation for telling the stories and everything, that I very much believe it. I also think that there's tons and tons of stuff that's faked, that people do like for sensationalization or whatever, just try to play pranks on people. But there's definitely something out there.
Or there's kind of like the Nephilim. They're not exactly demons, properly speaking. But like all cultures around the world have stories of like giants and weird beings and stuff like that. So, I don't know. What do you do with that?
And it's interesting that you pointed this out when we were talking about it. It's interesting that there's I'm trying to decide, do I want to go find the story and read it? The one with the what's his name? The Wendigo type character that like crossed the water and came up behind the guy. Remember that story? And like their reaction that he did because his grandpa had told him to was don't engage with it. Ignore it. Pretend it's not there. Just don't talk to it. Don't engage with it whatsoever. And you pointed out that that's very similar to what the fathers of the church and what saints say. They're like, don't, if you're having a demonic encounter of some type, don't engage with them. Don't talk to them. Don't look at them. Just don't even give them any of your attention, and don't go seeking it either. Don't go looking for it. Just don't give them your attention, because there's something about your attention. Human attention is really powerful, and it's like they're trying to siphon it off of you.
Your
So they
energies,
yeah.
Kind of like co-opt them. Yeah, I mean, there is stories, like I was just reading about, I believe it was Saint Herman, and there's stories of him dealing with demons, and there's some that would come up and pretend to be helpful, and others that would come up and try to trick him, and some of them were like half deer people, like people with deer antlers and stuff like that. And then you hear these stories like Native American stories about like the Wendigo or whatever, where there's like a deer guy. There's like a deer dude, or like skinwalkers. Similar thing, which is like in the Navajo like res, where you got these. My understanding is that they used to be people. But and then it's like they drink blood or something like that, and then they become cannibalistic demons, basically, that just run around like madmen out in the wilderness and turn into these monsters.
Kyle makes a good point here. He says attention is like a lower level of veneration or worship, so it makes sense that you'd not address it or engage with it if encountered. That is a really good point. Worship is like the highest level of attention. So there's like kind of like a spectrum here. So what you give your attention to is on a spectrum with what you worship. So don't give your attention to it. And it almost seems like there's like they are bound by they can't do anything to you unless you give them permission to.
I believe it's Saint John of the Ladder says something along the lines of like the human will is constructed such that all of the demons in hell and all of the principalities in the world could come against it and still not make it budge. Like there's something about the human will that it's constructed in such a way where it's like you always do have like agency. I totally butchered the quote, but
basically like all the demonic forces in the world couldn't muster the power to overcome the human will if the human will didn't want to be overcome.
Right. Like at the end of the day, it's because you said yes.
He says Kyle says literally everything paranormal, there's always a remedy about not giving it attention. Control your anger, fear, frustration, because it only feeds it. It's like that cool math thing. Fractals in the chat. They're like internet trolls, but in interdimensional space, says Dereverent. That's funny. Here's another story. Missing kids are the most heartbreaking. Doesn't matter what circumstances they go missing under. It's never easy. And we always dread the ones we find deceased. It's not common, but it does happen. David Paulides talks a lot about these kids as SAR teams find in places they shouldn't be or couldn't be. I can honestly say I've heard about this kind of thing happening more than I've seen it, but I'll share one of the ones that I think about a lot that I witnessed personally. A mother and her 3 kids were out for a picnic in an area of the park that has a small lake. One is 6, one is 5, and the other's about 3. She's watching them all really closely, and according to her, she never lets them out of her sight at any time. She never saw anyone else in the area either, which is important. She packs their stuff up, and they start to head back to the parking area. Now, this lake is only about 2 miles into the woods, and it's on a very clearly established trail. It's almost impossible to get lost getting from the parking area to it unless you're deliberately going off the path like an imbecile. Her kids are walking in front of her when she hears what sounds like someone coming up the path behind her. She turns around, and in the 4 or so seconds she's not looking, her 5-year-old son vanishes. She figures he stepped off the trail to pee or something, and she asks her other two where he went. They both tell her that, quote, a big man with a scary face came out of the woods next to them, took the kid's hand, and led him into the trees. The 2 remaining kids don't seem upset, and in fact, she says later that it seems like they've been drugged. They're sort of spacey and fuzzy. So, of course, she freaks out, starts looking frantically in the area for her kid. She's screaming his name, and she says at one point she thinks she heard him answer her. Now, obviously, she can't go blindly running into the woods. She's got the other 2 kids, so she calls the police, and they send us out immediately. We respond, and we start the search for him. Over the course of this search, which spans miles, we never find a single trace of the kid. Canines can't pick up any scent. We don't find any clothing or broken bushes or literally anything that would signify a child being there. Of course, there's suspicion about the mother for a while, but it's pretty clear that she's completely destroyed by the whole thing. We look for this kid for weeks with a lot of volunteer help, but eventually the search peters out and we have to move on. The volunteers keep searching, though, and one day we got a call on the radio letting us know that a body has been found and needs to be recovered. They tell us the location, and none of us can believe it. We figure it has to be a different kid. But we go out there about 15 miles from the site where he vanished, and sure enough, we find the body of the kid we've been looking for. I've been trying to figure out how this kid got where he did ever since we found him, and I've never come up with an answer. A volunteer just happened to be in the area because he figured he might as well look in places no one else would think to on the off chance the body had been dumped. He comes to the base of a tall, rocky slope, and halfway up, he sees something. He looks through his binoculars, and sure enough, it's the body of a little boy stuffed in a little opening in the rock. He recognizes the color of the kid's shirt, so he knows right away that it's the missing boy. That's when he calls it in, and we're dispatched. It took us almost an hour to get his body down, and none of us could believe what we were seeing. Not only was this kid 15 miles from where he'd started, there was no possible way he could have gotten up there on his own. This slope is treacherous, and it's hard even for us with our climbing gear. A 5-year-old boy had no way of getting up there, of that I'm certain. Not only that, but the kid doesn't have a scratch on him. His shoes are gone, but his feet aren't damaged or dirty, so it wasn't as if an animal dragged him up there. And from what we could tell, he hasn't been dead that long. He'd been out there over a month by that point, and it looked like he'd only been dead for at most a day or 2. The whole thing was unbelievably strange and was one of the most disconcerting calls I've ever been on. We found out later that the coroner determined the kid had died from exposure. He'd frozen to death probably late at night 2 days before we found him. There were no suspects and no answers. To date, this is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. There was another one. I don't remember if it was in this one. There was one where he talked about a kid who was it the one where the first kid was taken. They were out picking berries or something like that. The first kid was taken. The second kid was still there. And then they couldn't find the kid. And then they went back or something, and then the other kid disappeared. And then they wound up finding one of them. I can't remember if it was the first one or the second one. I think it was the first one. They found the first one. The second one they never found again. But the first one said that like a big hairy man had picked him up and put him inside a tree.
Wasn't it the fuzzy man?
It was it was the fuzzy man, yeah. Put him inside a tree and like fed him berries and like took care of him and said that he wasn't the right one or something like that. And had him there for like a couple of weeks and then just let him go. And the kid went back and they found him and he was fine. But he said there was like weird stuff about the guy's face, like he had no face or something like that. And then there's other ones where they found where the kid just disappeared. They couldn't find him. When they finally found him, or there might have been a lady that this happened to as well. She had food in her stomach, or the person that was found had food in their stomach, like they'd been eating, and they'd been eating like cooked meat and berries, and then they were found dead, but they died like a day or so before they were found, and they'd been missing for 6 months or something. I can't wrap my mind around it. It doesn't seem to make. I don't understand the. It just comes back to this thing of like there's like a neutral thing out there. There's there's obviously the demonic, there's the evil, but then there's also this like weird liminal kind of animal that seems to be of higher intelligence or something.
Liminal. That's the word I was looking for earlier. Liminal.
Yeah, the liminal
describe the
spaces.
backrooms. Yeah. Jackalope sends in a $10 super chat. He says, "Here's a thought: Christians call their God the Most High God. Could there be other powerful entities resting beyond the firmament that we would perceive as gods?" Well, I don't know that they're beyond the firmament, maybe, but certainly, yeah, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
All of the pagan gods were real entities.
Yeah, they're absolutely.
They're just demons.
Yeah, Christians have always believed in many gods. Here's another one with the stairs. So one of my first jobs as a trainee was a search op for a 4-year-old kid that had gotten separated from his mom. This is one of those cases where we knew we were going to find him because the dogs were on a strong scent trail and we saw clear signs he was in the area. We ended up finding him in a berry patch about a half mile from where he'd been last seen. He wasn't even aware that he'd wandered that far. One of the vets brought him back, which I was glad for because I'm really not good with kids and I find it hard to talk to them and keep them company. As my trainer and I are headed back, she decides to take me on a detour to show me one of the hot spots where we tend to find missing people. It's a natural dip in the land near a popular trail, and people will usually move downhill because it's easier. We hike out there, it's a few miles away, and we get there in about an hour or so. As we're walking around the area and she's pointing out places she's found people in the past, I see something in the distance. Now, this area we're in is about 8 miles from the main parking area, though there's back roads you can take to get closer if you don't want to hike that far. But we're on state-protected land, which means there can't be any kind of commercial or residential development out here. The most you'll ever see is a fire tower or makeshift shelter that homeless people think they can get away with building. But I can see from here that whatever this thing is has straight edges, and if there's one thing you learn quickly, it's that nature rarely makes straight lines. I point it out, but she doesn't say anything. She just hangs back and lets me wander over and check it out. I get within about 20 feet of it, and all the hair on the back of my neck stands up. It's a staircase in the middle of the fucking woods. In the proper context, it would be literally the most benign thing ever. It's just a normal staircase with beige carpet and about 10 steps tall. But instead of being in a house where it obviously should be, it's out here in the middle of the woods. The sides aren't carpeted, obviously, and I can see the wood it's made of. It's almost like a video game glitch where the house has failed to load completely and the stairs are the only thing visible. I stand there and it's like my brain is working overtime to try and make sense of what I'm seeing. My trainer comes and stands next to me and she just stands there casually looking at it as if it's the least interesting thing in the world. I ask her what the fuck this thing is doing here and she just chuckles. "Get used to it, rookie. You're going to see a lot of them." I start to move closer, but she grabs my arm. Hard. "I wouldn't do that," she says. Her voice is casual, but her grip is tight, and I just stand there looking at her. "You're going to see them all the time, but don't go near them. Don't touch them, don't go up them, just ignore them." I start to ask her about it, but something in the way she's looking at me tells me that it's best if I don't. We end up moving on, and the subject doesn't come up again for the rest of my training. She was right, though. I'd say about every 5th call I go on, I end up running across a set of stairs. Sometimes they're relatively close to the path, maybe within 2 or 3 miles. Sometimes they're 20, 30 miles out, literally in the middle of nowhere. I only find them during the broadest searches or training weekends. They're usually in good condition, but sometimes it looks like they've been out there for miles. All different kinds, all different sizes. The biggest I ever saw looked like they came out of a turn-of-the-century mansion and were at least 10 feet wide with steps leading up to at least 15 or 20 feet. I've tried talking about it with people, but they just give me the same response my trainer did. "It's normal, don't worry about it. They're not a big deal, but don't go close to them or up them." When trainees ask me about it now, I give them the same response. I don't really know what else to tell them. I'm really hoping someday I get a better answer, but it hasn't happened yet. I do think it's interesting that you're seeing right here exactly how some of these sorts of things will play out, where this tradition develops, where like one generation discovers there's something really weird with this stuff and you shouldn't talk about it or entertain it at all. So they just say, "Don't talk about it." And so the next generation is like, "Don't talk about it." And the next generation's like, "Yeah, don't talk about it." And people are like, "Well, why don't we talk?" Just don't. It's just,
Yeah, right. No one even knows why anymore.
yeah.
But that's just a thing that happens, and I don't know, just stay away.
Uh-huh. There was one really interesting, I think it was later on. There was a really interesting one where there was a kid, it was like the kid was playing by a river or something like that, and then he just disappeared. And so they went looking for him. And one of the techniques that they use when they're looking is they divide the woods up into a grid pattern. And they search for it. They take each grid and each like segment of the grid and they search it thoroughly and then go to the next grid and so on. And so they've got the dogs out and they're looking for this kid. They can't find this kid anywhere, but they start realizing that there's a pattern happening where the kid is skipping grids. So he's not in one, and it was like alternating back and forth. So he was
Like a checkerboard.
like a checkerboard. Yeah, he was in one but not in another, and then in another one but not in the next one.
The scent,
And
that is.
the scent, yeah. And then they find him pretty quickly, and they find a staircase. There's a staircase that's just sitting there, and the kid's like curled up, laying down on the bottom stair of it, and they go up to him, and he's very obviously dead. And when they did the autopsy, like his entire body looked like somebody had taken like a hole punch to it. Like all of his organs, all of his tissues and everything all had these like circular holes punched through everything, and he died of internal bleeding. How do you explain that?
Now, I don't know if these stories are real or fictional or whatever, but I've read enough of these to be like, okay, maybe this particular write-up is just, I don't know, it's on No Sleep, and I think that subreddit is fiction mostly.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, if you just like meander over to, well, first of all, you shouldn't be on Reddit because Reddit is cancer. But if you're on Reddit and you go over to any of like the cryptid related subreddits, like there's tons and tons of stories like this where people are like, dude, what the fuck just happened? I just heard a bunch of knocking on my porch, and then I looked out and I saw like a goat guy, and then I looked out again and he was gone. What does this mean?
Yeah. Yeah, here's one. Goat Man. He says, a lot of my less outdoorsy friends want to know if we've ever seen the Goat Man while I've been out on calls. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, I've never had anything quite like that happen. I guess the closest was the whole black-eyed man thing, but I didn't see anything. However, there was one call where I had something kind of similar happen, but I'm not sure I'm willing to chalk it up to the Goat Man. We'd gotten a report that an older woman had fainted along one of the trails and needed assistance getting back down to the main area. We hike up to where she's at, and her husband is just beside himself. He runs, well, I guess more jogs to us, and tells us that he was a little ways off the trail looking at something when his wife starts screaming behind him. He runs back to her, and she's passed out on the trail. We get her on a backboard, and as we're getting her down to the welcome center, she comes to and starts screaming again. I calm her down and ask her what happened. I can't remember verbatim what she said, but essentially what happened was this. She'd been waiting for her husband when she started hearing this really strange sound. She said it sounded sort of like a cat, but it was off somehow, and she couldn't quite figure out why. She went a little ahead to try and hear it better, and it sounded like it was coming closer. She said the closer it got, the more uneasy she was, until she finally figured out what was wrong. I do remember this next part because it was so weird I don't think I could forget it if I tried. It wasn't a cat. It was a man saying the word meow over and over. Just meow, meow, meow. But it wasn't a man. It couldn't have been because I've never heard a man make his voice buzz like that. I thought my hearing aid was going out, but it wasn't. I adjusted it, and it still sounded all buzzy. It was awful. He was coming closer, but I couldn't see him. And the closer he got, the more scared I was, and the last thing I remember was a shape coming out of the trees. I guess that's when I fainted. Now, obviously, I'm a little perplexed as to why a guy would be out in the fucking woods chanting meow, meow at people. He just hasn't met any Zoomers yet.
Right.
So once we get down the mountain, I tell my superior that I'm going to go search the area and see if I can find anything. He gives me the go-ahead, and I grab a radio and hike back to where she fainted. Now, first of all, I don't know what's got like. There's no way you could not pay me money to walk back out there.
Yeah, no kidding. You probably couldn't pay me enough money to go out the first time.
Right.
Unless it's like my own kid. Like
Right. I don't see anyone, so I keep going about a mile more. And when I head back, I go off the trail to see if I can figure out where she saw him coming from. It's almost sunset by this point. Nope. And I don't have any desire to be out at night alone, so I just sort of write it off and make a mental note to check it out again tomorrow. But as I'm headed back, I start to hear something in the distance. I stop and I call out for anyone in the immediate area to identify themselves. The sound didn't come closer or get louder, but it sounded exactly like a man saying meow, meow in this really odd monotone. As comical as it makes it sound, it was almost like that guy on South Park with the electrolarynx, Ned. I go off the trail in the direction I think it's coming from, but I never seem to get closer. It's almost like it's coming from all directions. Eventually, it just sort of fades out, and I end up going back to the welcome center. I didn't get any further reports like that, and even though I went back to that area, I never heard that exact sound again. I suppose it could have been some stupid kid out there fucking with people, but I have to admit it was weird. Duffhead says, anyone who's spent any amount of time in the sticks knows they ain't alone out there.
Oh, yeah.
And he said up here, he said, finally caught up in time to catch the Haint stories live. Been waiting for this episode. I'm pretty sure we were talking on the King Pill Discord voice chat, and he was talking about the Haints. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, correct me if I'm wrong, Duffhead, but I'm pretty sure the haint means there ain't nothing there. So there's these beings that you get haunted by them or whatever, and they ain't nothing there. I think it was something like that. Okay, I want to find the one about the chick that he.
Country for Haunt. Yeah.
Yeah, country. Okay, country for haunt. Let's see. There was the one. You remember the one of the? Sorry, it was terrible. The one of the. What do you call it? The chick who walked away to pee. And then.
Yeah.
That's the one I want to find here.
Yeah, Jackalope says the amount of people in the Southwest who will swear skinwalkers are real is impressive. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, like, okay, even if all these stories on this particular subreddit in this particular thread are just like fictional, like fanfic or whatever, I mean, there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, but this is inspired by real shit. Like,
yes,
there's a lot of people who experience really, really crazy shit out in the woods or out in the desert.
Here were a couple of the
Yeah, he says I'm almost convinced that they're real just because of how many stories I know. Yeah, exactly. Like, why does like everybody and why does everybody know somebody who has some crazy story?
Okay, so a teenage boy whose remains were recovered almost a year after he vanished. We found the top of his skull, 2 finger bones, and his camera almost 40 miles from where he was last seen. Camera was destroyed. The lower jaw and right foot of a 2-year-old boy on the highest peak of a ridge at the southern part of the park. The body of a 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome almost 20 miles from where she'd vanished. She died of exposure 3 weeks after going missing, and all of her clothes were intact except for her shoes and jacket. There were berries.
That I see commonly or that I hear about when you read these stories, that shoes are missing. Everything else is perfectly fine, not even dirty, but the shoes are missing.
Yeah, that's true. This one, it says there were berries and cooked meat in her stomach when they did the autopsy. The coroner said it appeared as if someone had been taking care of her. This is a weird one. The frozen body of a 1-year-old baby found a week after vanishing in the hollow trunk of a tree 10 miles from the area he was seen last. There was fresh milk found in his stomach, but his tongue was gone.
Ugh.
So let's see. Here's another stairs one.
It's not showing up on the share here.
Oh, oops. Okay, I didn't realize it opened in another tab. Okay, so for a year he stayed away from the stairs, but apparently his curiosity got the better of him. And on one call, he broke away from the line and went to go check out a set of them. He said they were about 10 miles from the path where a teenage girl had vanished, and the dogs were following a scent. He was on his own, lagging behind the main group when he saw a set of stairs off to his left. They looked like they were from a new house because the carpeting was pristine and white. He said that as he got closer, he didn't feel any different or hear any weird noises. He was expecting something to happen, like bleeding from his ears or collapsing, but he got right up next to them and didn't feel anything. The only thing he said that was odd was that there was absolutely no debris on the steps. No dirt, leaves, dust, anything. And there didn't appear to be any signs of animal or insect activity in the immediate area, which he found strange. It was less like things were avoiding them and more like they just happened to be in a relatively barren part of the forest. He touched the stairs and didn't feel anything except that sort of sticky feeling you get from new carpet. Making sure his radio was on, he slowly climbed the stairs. He said it was terrifying because the way they'd been stigmatized, he wasn't really sure what was going to happen to him. He joked that half of them expected to be teleported to some other dimension and the other half was watching for a UFO to come swooping down. But he got to the top of the little event and he stood there looking around. But he said the longer he stood on the top step, the more he felt like he was doing something very, very wrong. He described it as the feeling you'd get if you were in a part of a government building you have no business being in, as if someone was going to come and arrest you or shoot you in the back of the head at any second. He tried to brush it off, but the feeling got stronger and stronger, and that's when he realized he couldn't hear anything anymore. The sounds of the forest were gone, and he couldn't hear his own breathing. It was like some kind of weird, awful tinnitus, but more oppressive. He climbed back down and rejoined the search and didn't mention what he'd done. But he said the weirdest part came after. His trainer was waiting back at the welcome center after the search ended for the day, and he cornered my buddy before he could leave. He said his trainer had this look of intense anger, and he asked what was wrong. "You went up them, didn't you?" My buddy said it wasn't phrased as a question. He asked how his trainer knew. The trainer just shook his head. "Because we didn't find her. The dogs lost her scent." My buddy asked what that had to do with anything. The trainer asked how long he'd been on the stairs, and my buddy said no more than a minute. The trainer gave him this really awful, almost dead-eyed look and told him if he ever went up another set of stairs again, he'd be fired. immediately. The trainer walked away, and I guess he's never answered any of the questions my buddy has asked him about him since. Okay, so
What would possess you? Like, imagine you're in the middle of the woods, 10 miles deep, and you see a set of stairs. Yeah, like you were saying, you couldn't pay me to go near those things.
yeah, right. There was one story, I don't remember which one of them, but there's one of them that said there was like a guy that went up the stairs and like his hand got chopped off or something.
Yeah.
He was up at the top of the stairs and he reached his hand out and his hand just got slashed right off. Okay, here it is. So we've got some stories from some other search and rescue friends of his. So let's see. That one is sad. That one sucks. This is the one with the weird kids. And then, okay, here we go. This is a mind bender. The last story that KD told me was of something that happened to her when she got separated from her training group when she was a rookie. They were learning the basics of high elevation belaying on a well-mapped side of the mountain, and she had to use the bathroom. She went off about 50 yards from the group during a meal break and did her business. I'll tell the rest exactly as she told it to me. So I go to take a piss, and once I'm done, I start going back to the group. But I've only gotten about 5 feet when I realize I have no idea where I am. And this wasn't I got turned around lost. I mean, I had literally no fucking clue where I was. If you'd asked me, I don't even think I'd have been able to tell you what state we were in. It was sort of how I imagine people with amnesia feel, you know? You're completely lost and you have no idea what to do. So I stood there for a while just trying to figure out where the fuck I was and what I was supposed to do. But the longer I stand there, the more confused and turned around I get, so I start walking. As I recall, I just picked a random direction and went for it. And as I'm walking, it's just getting worse and worse to the point where I have no concept of why I'm on the mountain in the first place. I'm just trudging through the snow, and then I start hearing this voice. It's kind of inside my head almost, like if a frog could talk, all low and croaky. And it's telling me over and over, it's okay, you just need to find something to eat. Find something to eat and you'll be okay, just keep walking and find something to eat. Eat. So I start looking around for anything that I can eat, and I swear to God, I've never felt that hungry in my whole life. It was bottomless, and I think I'd have eaten just about anything you put in front of me right then. I had no concept of time, so I had no idea how long I'd been out when I hear an actual voice coming toward me. I go toward it and see one of the other SARs, and he looks fucking terrified. He's running toward me, asking if I'm okay and what the hell I'm doing out here. And the scary thing was, as he's running toward me, I kind of see myself reaching into my belt for my hunting knife. I'm not even really thinking about what I'm doing, but what I am thinking is that I have to eat. If I don't eat, I'll never be okay again, so I just have to eat. He sees me doing that, and he backs off right away. He yells at me to put my knife away, that he's not going to hurt me, and that kind of snaps me back. All of a sudden, I know exactly where I am, and I put the knife away. I run to him and ask him how long I've been gone, thinking he'll tell me I've been gone for half an hour or so. But he tells me I've been gone for 2 fucking days. I've gone over 2 peaks and ended up almost on the other side of the mountain, and if I kept going, I would have ended up wandering into about 300 miles of wilderness. They'd never have found me. He can't believe I'm not dead, and of course I don't know what the fuck to think. To me, no time has passed at all. I don't say anything, I just go back with him to a rendezvous point, and I'm taken back to HQ to be airlifted to the hospital. When I get there, they do all kinds of tests and try to figure out what happened. As best they can guess, I had some kind of weird fugue state, which is kind of like amnesia, or a weird seizure that knocked my brain out of whack. But the truth is that we really don't know. It's never happened again, but I'll tell you, ever since then, I never go out there alone. People rag on me for making them come with me when I have to leave the group, but I just tell them that listening to me piss in the snow is better than losing me for 2 fucking days on a freezing mountain.
Yeah, and then there's the stories of like skinwalkers or like the Wendigo or whatever. It's like, as I understand the stories, it's like it was a person who did like broke some crazy taboo or committed some kind of crime or like ate human meat or something like that, and then they just kind of like go crazy and they're just consumed by this like bottomless hunger, and they go around like eating people. It's like stories like that don't exist, like, because they were just made up,
Mm-hmm. Well, like, think about what's his name, Nebuchadnezzar.
Oh yeah.
So Nebuchadnezzar went crazy and was basically like an animal out crawling around in the field eating grass and stuff for 7 years. So it seems very clear to me that it's very possible for people to get cursed somehow, and whether this lasts for a period of time or just, how many different, if you imagine these people might get like cursed, so to speak, and they just go out deep into the woods and they're wandering around in the woods and they wind up meeting up with other people in the same boat, sort of. We've got the people who live out on like remote tropical islands that have never been encountered by like modern humans before. Why couldn't we have weird groups of these people that just live out in the woods? And they're sort of in this liminal space between human and animal.
Yeah, like, man, I like nature. I love being in the woods, but like, I get really skittish real easy. Like, I could never do this job. You couldn't pay me enough to do this job. Like, on the first day, I'd be out.
Yeah, right.
We'd be like 10 minutes into the woods at night, and I'd be psyching myself out. I'm like, I gotta go. I can't.
I can't think. Here's some of those stairs stories. This one says, the stairs have been out here as long as the parks have existed. We have records going back decades describing them. Sometimes people go up them and nothing happens. Other times, look, I really don't like talking about this, but sometimes really bad shit happens. I saw one guy get his hand sliced clean off when he got to the top step. He reached out to touch a tree branch, and it happened so fast. 1 second his hand was there, and the next it was gone. Completely clean wound. We didn't find his hand, and the guy almost died. Another time, a woman touched one of the stairs, and a blood vessel in her brain exploded. Literally exploded like a water balloon. She sort of stumbled down and came over to me, and all she got out was, "I think something's wrong with me." She dropped like a sack of flour, dead before she hit the ground. I'll never forget the way the blood leaked into the inside of her eye. Before she died, I watched it turn red. I watched it happen, and there wasn't a single thing I could do to help. Okay, so then the last one is funny. After like the first 4 parts, then it started giving you an NSFW tag on them. And that one's disgusting.
It opened up in another tab.
Oh, okay. Yeah, hold on. I'm going to see if I can find the... Oh, this one looks kind of interesting. All right, we'll do this one. One of the vets at the training op reads No Sleep, and he recognized my stories. He knows me pretty well, and we've swapped stories before. He asked if he could share something he's noticed about the stairs and some thoughts he had. I'm really glad you decided to share these. I think it's important that people be aware of what's out there, especially since the Forest Service is doing such a good job at covering it all up. I asked him what he meant. What do you mean, what do I mean? The lack of any kind of media attention, no coverage of missing kids or bodies found miles from where they got lost in the first place. David Paulides hit this right on the head. The Forest Service is doing everything they can to keep people coming here, even if it isn't safe. I mean, to be fair, it's not like these things happen every day, but the numbers add up and it's worth looking into. Especially the stairs. I was surprised you didn't mention the flipped ones. I didn't know what he was talking about. I couldn't remember him ever talking about something like that. He seemed somewhat incredulous. Dude, I can't believe you've been on this long without seeing them. No one told you about them? I shrugged and asked him to elaborate. Well, there's the normal stairs, the ones that pop up when we're out a ways. I know you know about them. But sometimes I've run across ones that are flipped upside down. I guess it would be like if you had a dollhouse and the stairs were a separate piece. Now take that, flip it upside down so the top step is stuck in the dirt, and put it out in the woods. They're like that. I don't see them as often, but they're odd to say the least. Makes me think of footage taken after a tornado when houses are all blown apart and random things are left standing like chimneys and garden walls. Those ones freak me out more than the normal ones because I can't really write those off as easily. I don't scare very easily like most of us who work out here, but that idea stuck with me and it bothers me. He also mentions how many people were bothered by the guy with no face. He got really excited and told me he'd seen something similar. I was out on a training exercise a few years ago. I was camped out in my tent and I heard someone walking around outside of camp. We're told not to wander far, which you know, so I wondered if maybe it was a rookie who'd gotten up to pee and couldn't find his way back. Remember that guy in our group a few years back who almost fell off the damn mountain? Well, I'm paranoid about that happening again, so I got up to see what was going on. I went to the edge of camp and I called to whoever it was and told them that camp was this way. But they kept going back out into the woods, so I went after them. I know it was stupid, but I was half asleep and I just really didn't want to deal with some idiot getting hurt. I followed this thing on a dead straight course for about a mile and then it stopped on the edge of a little river. I could see the outline of it because the water was reflecting the moon and it looked just like an ordinary guy. He had a pack on and it looked like he was facing me. I asked if he was okay, if he needed help, and he cocked his head like he didn't understand me. I always have my little pocket knife on me and it's got a little thumb light attached to it, so I turned that on and lit up his chest so I wouldn't blind him. He was breathing slow and deep, so I wondered if he was sleepwalking. I went closer and asked him again if he was okay. I moved the light up and something didn't seem right, so I stopped. He kept breathing in this real slow, deep breaths, and I sort of figured out gradually that that's what was bothering me. It was like he was pretending to breathe, but not actually doing it. His breaths were too even and deep, and all his movements were exaggerated, like his shoulders going up and his chest moving. I told him to identify himself, and he made this muffled noise. I moved the light up, and I shit you not, this guy had no face, just smooth skin. I freaked out, and I sort of fumbled my light, but I saw him move toward me, but he didn't actually move. I don't know how to explain it, but 1 second he was on the edge of the river, and the next he was 5 feet from me. I never looked away or blinked. It was like he moved so fast my brain couldn't keep up. I tripped and fell on my ass, and I could see this line open up on his throat. It stretched up to his ears, and his head tilted back, and he smiled at me with his throat. There wasn't any blood, just this gaping dark hole, and I swear he smiled at me with this gash in his throat. I got up and I ran as fast as I could back to camp. I couldn't hear him following me, but I felt like he was always right behind me, even though when I looked back, I couldn't see him. I calmed down when I got back to camp. The fire was still going, and I guess that pack mentality of being with other people made me stop and breathe a little. I waited by the fire to see if he'd follow me there, but I didn't hear anything else for a few hours, so I went back to bed. I know it sounds weird, but the whole thing was just so surreal. It was almost like I immediately wrote it off as my imagination.
Imagine going to bed after that.
Yeah. Nope. Nope. Just never sleeping again. So, okay, I want to find the one with the,
Gamer Milk says that fugue state is what Irish fairies can give you as well. So we've got a guy here who knows the deep lore.
Welcome, deep lore knower. I want to find the one of the meat guy.
The meat guy.
Yeah.
Was that in the comments or was that one of his stories?
I think it was in
Or I think it was like one of the stories that he got from someone else relating it to him.
yeah, and it was toward the end, so I'm scrolling down here to see if I can find it.
Natashki says the trick is to not be curious, but also to not be afraid because we have God. And it's like, yes, I understand that intellectually, but if I saw that shit, I'd be losing my mind.
Okay, here's a good one. This is a great one.
I'd just be crossing myself over and over.
Uh-huh.
Which is something okay. When is the last time you had a nightmare?
It's been a long time.
I've noticed, like, I don't dream or I don't remember my dreams that much, and I have nightmares even less often. But occasionally I do have them, and I've noticed a distinct change before I started getting into orthodoxy, and then afterwards. Afterwards, if I have a nightmare, in my dream, I'll be making the sign of the cross.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like I'm aware enough, like that's what I do. I don't know. I did have an episode with sleep paralysis like 2 weeks ago or something like that. It was it was horrible. It was because I was stuck there and I'm kind of in and out of sleep and awake. I'm kind of in that state, and I know, I'm aware enough kind of to know that like, okay, I've got sleep paralysis. I'm kind of dreaming. I'm kind of not, and I can't move. And I'm laying in bed and I'm looking down the hallway, which I'm pretty sure the door was shut, but like in my dream world, it wasn't shut. It was open because I'm not a maniac and I shut the door. I don't leave the hallway open, the dark hallway open when I go to sleep. But I'm laying there and then I'm like stuck in this loop. It sucked. Like, I'm looking down the hallway and this figure starts walking towards me and gets right to like the border of my room, the doorway. And I don't know how to describe him other than kind of like a Slender Man, kind of like there wasn't really features, just dark, tall, skinny. And then I get to like the threshold of my room, and then I'd kind of wake up, and like it would jerk me awake, but I'm still stuck. But it jerked me awake, and then I'd be saying the Jesus prayer and making the cross or whatever, and just kind of like freaking out. And then I'd doze off again, and then it would happen again. I'd see him walk towards me again. And then again, it happened like 6 times. And then finally, the last time, he gets into my room, and then he grabs my legs, and next thing I know, I'm like pulled out into my living room, and it's like Poltergeist in that scene. I'm like flying around my living room with all of my stuff like flying around with me. and then I kind of like I hear yelling,
Uh-huh.
and then as I'm coming more and more awake, I realize it's me yelling, and then I wake up and I'm screaming.
Uh-huh.
And then I woke up my wife and I like pulled her over me and I'm so scared.
Protect me.
Yeah.
What'd you say, Bubba?
I'm holding the fridges to you.
You're hauling the fridges to me?
Yeah.
Hey, stay back. Stay up here.
Well, I thought you would need your fridges back there.
You thought I would need my fridges back there?
Yep.
No, I don't need any fridges back there. Thanks.
Oh.
Are you getting ready for bed?
Yep.
You can give me a hug?
Dump trucks don't give hugs.
Dump trucks don't give hugs?
No.
Oh.
I'm with them.
Oh, you're a dump
Obviously.
truck. Okay. Okay, so I found a couple here.
That was the last nightmare I had. That was like 2 weeks ago.
I've had it hasn't happened to me for a long time, but when I was younger, I had
Dump truck just arrived. He doesn't give hugs.
yeah. I had this I've had a few different times where I've been asleep and kind of like in between awake and asleep, where I'm sort of aware of my surroundings, but I'm still asleep and I'm aware that I'm asleep, and I've heard voices like
Yeah.
like the voice of someone talking very clearly. They just like say something in the room, and I can never remember what it is, but I have this like I can hear the voice in my head right now. I can like replay it in my head right now. It's very strange. It's like somehow in the room but also inside my head at the same time. So I'm hearing it like from the inside out and from the outside in simultaneously. So it's got this really weird echoey quality to it. It's a man's voice and he usually just says like 2 or 3 words just very matter of factly, and instantly I'm snapped awake. And then I've got to try to remember. So but it's not scary. It's almost more like I don't know, there's like a sort of a calming effect with it. But I haven't experienced that in it's probably been at least 10 or 15 years.
I've had that happen.
Okay,
Do you remember that dream?
Hold on, I
had
gotta
that
close my.
nightmare?
I'll have my. I can hear you. Keep talking.
Do you remember that? I had a nightmare. I remember it was a couple years ago, and I posted about it in the Discord and kind of laid out the as I remembered it. And that one was a doozy.
I don't
Do you
remember
remember
it.
that?
No.
I don't remember it as well now. I'm sure I could go back and look it up. But like I'm out in the driveway, in my backyard, hanging out with some people, and then we walk into my back door, and then jump cut. I'm putting my kids to bed, and then we say the prayers, put the kids to bed, and then we turn away, and then the little one, who's a baby at the time, starts screaming. Screaming and like turning blue and red. So both choking and screaming at the same time.
Uh-huh.
And I'm just, I don't know, just holding her and praying, because it's, what else do you do? And then her face slowly starts to like elongate into like this equestrian sort of shape. And like the sound starts to turn into more like a donkey or like a horse, like screaming. It was horrible. And then I wake up. It was horrible. Worst dream I've ever had in my life.
No, thank you. Okay, so I've got a couple of these here that are funny, and then I've got the Meat Man one.
I did have a dream earlier this week where I did a bunch of cocaine. That was a fun dream.
Oh, so that's the experience you're speaking from.
Yeah.
Cocaine sucks when it's doing cocaine sucks. How do you know? I dreamed about it.
No,
okay.
the dream was more fun than the actual coke.
Duff had, I don't know if you saw earlier, Duff had said that, or he might have posted it in the Discord. He said that you just did the wrong cocaine.
Yeah, I don't know about that, man. Maybe.
Okay.
I guess we'll never know.
As you all know, I went to a training seminar recently and heard some amazing and horrible things there. One of the guys I talked to while I was there told me a story when we were all around the campfire one night. We were both pretty drunk, you'll see a pattern here, and we were swapping stories. He told me this one. Me and another guy were out in a field search because some campers reported screaming noises at night. So we head out there to look for whatever fucking mountain lion has wandered into the area, and I'm pissed.
Yeah, mountain lions.
We've had 3 of them show up in the camping areas that year alone. I'm getting tired as hell of constantly having to deal with them. Plus, I just don't like them anyway. They're a pain in the ass and they're loud and they scare the shit out of me. Fucking cats, pieces of shit. I'm groaning about it to the guy I'm with and he thinks it's a real fucking riot. So we're seeing all these broken branches and what look like dens, and we're pretty sure we know where this thing is. I call in and they tell me to confirm if possible, which just means they want you to step in a big pile of shit and use that as proof. I'm not seeing any though, so I basically just tell them to shove it. I'm done. We know that damn thing's out there somewhere, even if I'm not stepping in its shit or inside its mouth or whatever. Guy I'm with wanders off to take a piss or whatever, and I stay behind watching this little burrow under a tree to see if maybe a fox or something is living under it, because I love foxes, man. They're cute as hell. But anyway, I'm watching this tree, and I start hearing branches crackling, and it's coming from the direction my partner went opposite of. Now, I've got my pistol, but you and I both know that's not going to do shit against a cat. I cock it and holler for my partner to get his dumbass back, but he's too far and he can't hear me. I stand up and get my sights on where this thing is approaching, and I shit you not, man, I just about peed myself. This guy is coming toward me, and he's backflipping through the fucking woods. Like, instead of walking, he's doing these crazy fucking backflips, and I swear to God, he cleared every fucking log and bush in his path. It was like he knew right where he was going. I yell at the guy to stop right where he is, that I'm pointing a gun right at him, but he keeps coming, and I just kind of lost it. I shot at the ground in front of him, and it was a dumb fucking thing to do, but man, I didn't want this guy anywhere near me. When I fired, he was about 50 yards from me. And as soon as the gun goes off, he whirls around and goes off, backflipping back into the woods.
Like, this is hilarious to read about, but imagine if this actually happened to you. You would be losing your fucking mind.
Oh, man, you're just hanging out in the woods, and some dude starts backflipping through the woods toward you.
Just clearing trees like Paul Bunyan along the way.
It's Spider-Man. My partner hears my gun go off and runs back and asks what's up, and I tell him there's some fucking weirdo out here hopped up on God knows what, and we need to get the hell out of Dodge. I let the cops know what happened. I didn't get any trouble for firing, but man, I don't know what that motherfucker was on, but I've never seen anything like that before. Shit was absolutely butt-fuck crazy. Okay, so there's that one.
Yeah, casual backflipping demon.
Yeah. So this one here, let's see. Actually, I had something sort of weird like that happen a while back. I was doing some trail scouting, and I was out in the middle of nowhere figuring out where we were going to have this trail run through. I hadn't seen anyone else for probably a good 2 hours, so I wasn't really paying attention to where I was going. I was just looking at the ground for the most part. Then out of nowhere, I crested this little hill and almost ran into this guy. He was older, probably in his 60s, and I started to apologize to him for running into him. And then I noticed his face, and I probably looked like a complete douchebag because I stopped and just stared at him. It took me a second to figure out what was wrong, but this guy's face was huge. He was like the anti-Charlie Kirk. I know that sounds weird, but it's the only way I can describe it. His head wasn't big or anything. It was normal, but the amount of space his face took up was just way too much. Like if he took someone's face and enlarged it all by about 2 times. He doesn't say anything. He just kind of looks at me, and I backed up and was kind of stuttering and saying I was sorry. And I went around him and fucking got out of there and did what I needed to do. The whole time I kept looking behind me because I was so freaked out that he'd pop up behind me or something. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I swear to you, it was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. This one here. A couple of years ago, I was camping with my girlfriend, and we were out about 2 miles from the road at the site I know. We went to bed that night, but we couldn't sleep because... It was because we kept hearing that grinding noise. My brother used to grind his teeth in his sleep, and it kind of reminds me of that. My girlfriend was freaking out, but I just kept telling her to ignore it because I've heard it before, and you just have to ignore it. It goes away eventually. You guys know what I mean. So eventually, I got her to go to sleep, but I woke up probably 2 hours later because something was just off. I rolled over, and she wasn't there, and I kind of freaked out. I ran out of the tent calling her name, but I didn't have to go far. She was standing at the edge of the camp looking at something in the trees, and I could see she was really pale. The fire was low, but bright enough to see her. Anyway, so I ran up to see what was going on, and she was dead asleep, but her eyes were open. She had this real spaced out look, So I put my arm around her to lead her back, but she wouldn't move. She just said really quietly something like, "I have to go now, Eddie. I have to go. It's here." I was like, "You're just sleepwalking. Come back to bed." But she wouldn't budge. She just kept standing there and saying she had to go. And I looked where she was looking, and there was a fucking staircase right there about 15 yards away. Gray one, concrete. And she started to walk toward it, but I yanked her back, and that woke her up. She looked at me like I was fucking out of my mind, and she asked what the fuck she was doing out of the tent. I didn't tell her anything. I just told her she was sleepwalking. The grinding was gone, so she just went back to the tent with me and fell asleep. And then okay, I found the one with the meat guy.
All right.
So many stories of black-eyed people wandering around the woods and calling out in the night, mimicking the sound of running water or a bobcat screaming. One man in particular goes to every news station he thinks will listen to him and tells the same story. He was
Bobcats do sound like. Have you ever heard one scream?
Yeah.
It sounds like a woman being like
Uh-huh.
murdered with an axe.
Or a cougar as well. Here,
Yeah.
let's do this for anybody who's never heard a big cat scream at night. Let's give you guys something to freak out about. Here we go.
So if you ever hear this in the woods, don't go help.
Yes, do not. Here you go.
Fuck that. He's like, fuck this, I'm out.
That's exactly me.
I'd have been moving faster.
He's like, I'm the black guy. I'm the one that's gonna die first.
Imagine that, a mountain lion in heat.
Yeah.
What if this is what women did when they were ovulating?
Before the men civilized them, they just went out into the woods and went, Wah!
Yeah, and hit sticks on the ground like the last scream.
Yeah, right.
That's them and their mate.
Yeah.
They just want a baby.
But, like, even that sounds clearly like a cat. But imagine being out there and hearing that.
Yeah, he's just like stumbled upon a screaming retreat.
Yeah. Okay. One man in particular goes to every news station he thinks will listen to him and tells the same story. He was deer hunting, had camped out in a very remote area, and woke
The
up
reference
because
says bear man passing a kidney stone.
Yeah.
So if you ever hear that in the woods and you get creeped out, just think of that. Bear man passing a kidney stone, and maybe you'll laugh and not be so creeped out.
Yeah. When Bear Man comes up to you, you could just ask him. Be like, hey, man, how you doing? It sounded like you're having a rough one out there.
My stepdad passed a kidney stone once, and he's like, dude. Yeah, I wasn't. No one was home. I think maybe my sister was home, but he was just in the bathroom screaming. And he's like, dude, if there had been a gun in there, I would have ended it so quick.
I was on a trip with my dad. It was the summer before I went to college. My dad and I were down at like a church retreat in the mountains in Southern California, and I woke up in the middle of the night. We were in a cabin out in the woods, and I woke up in the middle of the night. It was completely dark. Like I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, but I could hear this weird kind of whimpering sound, and it sounded like my little sister at the time was probably like 6, maybe, and it kind of 6 or 8, and my brain told me that this was my sister, like crying. But but she wasn't there with us, so I couldn't make sense of it. And I'm trying to wake myself up, and I finally my eyes start to adjust to the darkness a little bit. I get down out of the bed, and I look, and my dad is sitting in the middle of the floor, with his arms wrapped around the trash can, and he's kind of rocking back and forth, whimpering. And I thought it was my sister whimpering. It was my dad. That's not a comfortable feeling, being with your dad in the dark in the woods, and your dad is on the floor whimpering. And he was passing a kidney stone. So we wound up having to, he actually had 2. He had a stone on both sides. And I wound up having to, we had a rental car, and I had to drive down. This is before I had my driver's license or anything. I had to drive down to like 2 hours down to the Loma Linda Hospital. And my dad we brought the trash can from the campground. And he was the whole way down, he was leaned into the back seat, just ralphing into this trash can and just groaning in agony. and we got him into the hospital. They got him hooked up and to a morphine drip, and so before they hooked him up, they were like, she was like getting him all set up, and she's like, "All right, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your pain?" And he was like 12, and she got him hooked up and got the morphine drip on him and everything. And like 10 or 15 minutes later, she was like, "How would you rate your pain now?" And he goes, probably like a 9, maybe 8 or 9. I know women who have had children and passed kidney stones, and they said that the kidney stone, the childbirth pain had nothing on the kidney stone pain. They would gladly have 20 more children before they would want to pass another kidney stone. Okay. Bill Hicks says study of stuff is about to start streaming. Great. That means once he gets started, we can send you guys all over there. I'll get that set up on the YouTube channel after we read this last story.
Duffhead says, Matt, it's a slightly different genre, but the Reddit blurry lamp story is a mind bender too. I'll have to save that one for the future.
Reddit blurry lamp story. Okay. I opened that, and then what was the other thing? Oh, it was Mormon Bigfoot Kane. All right, I've got these opened up in separate tabs to go down.
All right, do the meat guy one, and then we'll wrap.
All right. Okay, so share this again.
Kyle says, we need a full episode of this. Dude, we've been doing this for like an hour and a half. That's like a full episode.
Yeah, just about. But this means apparently there's demand for our schizo stuff. We've got so many more schizo directions we can go with all this stuff. You've got stuff to look forward to, we'll say that. All right, so one man in particular goes to every news station he thinks will listen to him and tells the same story. He was deer hunting, had camped out in a very remote area.
Wrong tabs up.
Oh. Really?
Oh, no, okay, you're good.
Oh, yeah, it's here. He camped out in a very remote area and woke up because something was scraping against his tent. He thought it was a raccoon or a fox until the thing pressed its face against the door of the tent, at which point he could very clearly make out a human nose and mouth. He kicked at it, but it leaped back and was gone by the time he opened the tent flap, gun at his side. He fired 2 warning shots, and when the sound had faded, he heard a snap behind him. A man was standing at the edge of the campsite. This man was not wearing any clothing, but he also didn't possess any kind of human flesh. As this hunter described it, the man was made of some kind of amalgamation of raw meat and hair, as if someone had scooped up roadkill and molded it into the vague shape of a man. The face was lumpy and only a rough approximation of a human face. The thing opened its lopsided mouth, and from it came the sound of the gun the hunter had fired. It did this twice before mimicking the sound of the tent zipper and fleeing into the night. That's probably of all the stories, that's the one that stuck with me the most, particularly because of the visual of the human face on the tent. Like I could really visualize that. And then you open it up and you see this like hairy raw meat man standing there, and he opens his mouth and the sound of a gunshot comes out.
The one that freaked me out the most, I think it was actually in the comments, but it was that guy telling the story of when he and his buddy were by the river and that like deer-headed guy came out.
Uh-huh. Yeah, the Wendigo one. And it
Yeah,
had the kind of foggy white eyes hovering over his shoulder.
Yeah, so the story goes like this dude and his buddy are out camping with their family. Their family's back at the camper at the main campsite. They go like maybe not even a mile off or whatever down to the river, and they set up their own little campsite there. And they're just hanging out around the fire, and it's starting to get dark out, or it is dark out. And his buddy, he looks over at his buddy and he's like, "Hey, do you see that over there on the other side of the river? Walking into the river," and he sees antlers. He's like, "Oh, it's a deer or something." His buddy turns around and looks at it, stares at it for a second, then turns back and he says, put your head down and just keep making small talk. Ignore it. Don't look at it." And he's like, okay. So he realizes out of the corner of his eye that this deer is walking up towards them directly. And he's sitting there, and his friend like continues talking about like, I don't know, whatever music album or something they were talking about, and he's trying to make small talk, and he sees this thing like come up, and it's bipedal. It's like a man, a mantler, if you will. Thank you, Duffhead. And it's standing there, and it comes up behind his friend, and it's like 3 inches from his friend's back, just standing there, just starting to lean over, looking down at him, and he's facing his friend, and he sees out of his periphery this thing leaning over, just kind of standing there breathing, waiting for them to look at it. And, he's having a hard time making small talk knowing that thing's right there. And he finally kind of makes a quick look up at it, and he sees just these white eyes. And at that point, he pisses himself, and they take off running back to the main camp. And he says,
He said it was muttering too, like it was talking.
Oh yeah, he could vaguely make out some. Yeah, it was like grumbling or something like that. And they get back to the main camp, and he has to take his pants off because he literally pissed himself. And they're like 12 at the time. And he looks over at his friend, and he's like, "What? How did you know? What? Why did you say to ignore it?" And he's like, "I don't know. My grandpa said if you're ever in the desert or out in the woods and something approaches you, don't engage with it, don't look at it, ignore it."
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I just found that kind of interesting because in those stories that guy was from the Reddit post, that guy was talking about, like he was relating the conversation he was having with his friends, and his one friend's like, "Oh, talking about the grinding teeth sound," and his friend makes a comment like, "I knew if I could just get my girlfriend to ignore it, it'd go away eventually. You guys all know what I mean." And then they're all like, "Yeah, we knew what he meant." Like this is common knowledge. Like, oh yeah, you hear weird shit, you see weird shit, you just ignore it, it goes away eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Which then does kind of dovetail well into like some of the spiritual writings I've read from the fathers when it comes to engaging in spiritual warfare and dealing with demons and stuff. And they're just like, don't engage with them.
Mm-hmm.
They're just flies. You just flick them away. Ignore them. Because they can't do anything until you start playing ball.
There's one last story here. You'll remember this one. A young couple out for a hike in the rocky areas of my park reported to me yesterday that they'd seen something strange out on a peak I'm very familiar with. They were taking turns looking through a pair of binoculars, and the man noticed a hiker climbing up a very steep part of the cliff face. He watched the man scale the slope, and it didn't occur to him until the incident was over that this person had no climbing gear. When the climber reached the top of the peak, which was about 5 miles away, they turned and faced the young man. He said whoever or whatever this person was looking right at them. The climber waved in an exaggerated manner before snapping in half at the waist sideways and leaping off the peak. The young man didn't see where the climber landed. I sent them on their way with assurances that I'd check it out. I lied. I won't be turning in a report because there are 10 others exactly like it. The climber is well known in that area. I don't question it anymore. Imagine that. You're just out there, you're like, hey, look, there's a guy climbing up there. That's kind of weird. You grab your binoculars, you're like looking at it, and it like turns around and it's like 5 miles away and it like looks at you and it's like, hi! And then it just snaps itself in half and dives off the edge of the mountain. I'd be like, what the fuck is happening?
And then you go to the ranger and like the reaction is the same thing to the staircases. It's just kind of like, yeah, oh yeah, that's the climber.
Oh yeah, he does that.
That guy.
You get used to him. What?
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up out in the country, but I might be a city boy listening to these stories.
Yeah, same here. Oh man.
All right. Well, I've got the redirect set up here, so if you guys just hang out as soon as we end the stream, you'll automatically get sent over to the study of stuff. Go join them. Let them know that King Pilled is rating them, and say hi from us. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for showing up and entertaining us with all of this and allowing us to entertain you. We've got some more good schizo stuff that we've been talking about lately that might relate to some of these things. So maybe we'll keep dribbling these into the stories that we talk about.
Duffhead says he has an uncle that was a literal schizo, and he'll share some stories about that sometime. I look forward to these.
Oh hell yeah, that'd be great.
Not a schizo, a seer.
That's right, a seer. Taylor Brown says, join the Discord. That's right, guys. Join the Discord. We'd love to have you in there. Kingpill.com. Do us a favor, like the stream, help us with the algorithm, give us a comment for the algorithm gods. And if you did not like all of our banter at the beginning of the episode, let us know so that we can make sure we do more of it in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And with all that said, we
maybe in the middle of a topic, we'll just take a break and do some banter.
We should do that sometime. We talked about doing a an episode where we like have a title of the stream and like a subject, and we lead in with the subject and everything, and then never talk about it.
Yeah.
Just spend the rest of the episode talking about anything but it, and then just end it. All right.